My boyfriend, 22 male, compared me to his brother's perfect girlfriend and has started tearing apart our relationship. Original post, my boyfriend Jake and I are high school sweethearts and share an apartment with his brother Finn. Finn has been seeing a woman named Bonnie for the past 3 months. They met over Tinder and with certain restrictions lifted, we're finally getting to spend time with her IRL. She's a really great person and she and Finn are stupidly into each other. Like, accidentally finishing each other's sentences in love, staring at each other with big gooey eyes in love. It's kinda gross but kinda sweet. A couple of days ago I noticed that Jake's been acting weird. He's been a lot quieter and a bit colder to me, going to bed early, getting up late. I tried to kiss him and he turned away. Yesterday when Finn was out, I asked what was up with him. He started off kinda hostile but when I said that I was really feeling hurt, he blew up. Summarized, he told me that he was rethinking our entire relationship after listening to his brother talk about Bonnie. He said that Bonnie asked for Finn's preference when she cut her hair and didn't get bangs when he said he thought they looked stupid when I got a pixie without asking Jake what he'd think first. He said that Bonnie gave Finn a blowjob every night before bed and one every morning when he woke up, when I don't really like oral, giving or receiving. He said I never offer to give him massages or pack his lunch. For clarification, I do things for him all the time, but we've never been lovey-dovey. We don't even celebrate Valentine's Day, his suggestion. We both always agreed it was stupid and unrealistic. In fact, we always used to make fun of people for being sappy and definitely gave Finn hell for a bit over being so gooey. He was crying by the end of it, saying that he felt sick over missing out on someone who would love him that much. I said I loved him but he didn't want to hear it. He started gagging and threw up a little bit because he was crying so hard. I didn't know what else to do so I got him some water and went to bed. I went to work early and I've been hanging out at a coffee shop but I have to go home soon. I have no idea where to go from here or what to say to him. I don't even know if we're still together. Help? Just? With all of this shit. Top comments. Comment 1. In a million years, I would never be able to look at my partner again if they said something like this to me. I'd be out the door for good. Comment 2. Et puis ils ont commencé à pleurer si fort qu'ils ont vomi? No thank you. That kind of entitlement and immaturity is a boner killer. Comment 3. He sounds like a grown-up version of Eric from South Park. Update 1. Sorry I didn't respond to anyone's comments. I went home after posting and by the time I logged back onto Reddit the post had been locked. A few of you asked for the update so here it is. I'm single. I came home and Jake was gone. Finn was there and asked if I could sit down for a bit. He wouldn't give me the exact details but said that he and Jake had talked while I was out. He also showed me a few text messages to prove it. Apparently, Finn had never shared any details with his brother, but Jake had been able to hear them moan through the walls when Bonnie stayed over. It wasn't a bro talk or anything after all. Just the man I thought was gonna marry listening to his brother have sex through the walls. Neat. When Finn got home from work, Jake tried joking about it and made comments about Bonnie's race. Finn kicked him out and now Jake is gonna be staying with their parents so I have to pay his share of the rent too because Finn refuses to let him in and Jake refuses to come back. Double neat. A few people had questions so here we go. Did Jake ever mention wanting romantic gestures? Number we actually got together because we were the only goths in school. We bonded over being against lovey-dovey stuff like that. We grew out of the edgy phase but yeah. He always was firm. He hated Valentine's Day and women who needed roses or gifts to feel loved. Has he ever done anything like this before? Now that I think about it, yeah. He's thrown tantrums before but never like this. Things like carrying out orders, forgetting his side dishes or stores running out of his favorite items always made him really emotional. Why don't you like oral? A bad incident involving Jake's braces left me with some scarring down there. He liked deep throating. 0 out of 10. I feel sorry for Bonnie. I don't want to know any more details about their relationship but they seem happy. They work at the same high-intensity job, think physical trainers or OT, so she packs meal-prepped bento boxes for him and herself. Finn buys her flowers, fixes her car, goes over when spiders get into her apartment. Like I said, they're cute. This is fake? Listen man, that's your right to believe it. I think it's fake and I'm the one that has to figure out how to ship 200 Funko Pops to my ex. So there you go. Top comments. Comment 1. I'm the one that has to figure out how to ship 200 Funko Pops to my ex. Nope, his brother can figure that shit out. That dude is no longer your responsibility. You also don't have to pay double rent. Jake can pay rent for a place he doesn't live in. You need to find a new place to live. So you don't have to be surrounded by a reminder of your past relationship. Comment 2. He had 200 Funko Pops. It was doomed from the start. This is a repost sub. I am not the oopie. I sued my parents and received a $1,200,000 settlement for years of favoritism toward my older sister, which deeply affected my life. I sued my parents for manipulating my golden sister and received a settlement of $1,200,000. Growing up, I always felt like I lived in the shadow of my older sister, Elizabeth. She was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I was old enough to notice, it was clear she was the star of our family. My parents, John and Margaret, were well off and well respected in our community. My father ran a thriving real estate business, and my mother, a retired concert pianist, devoted her time to social events and managing our home. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, but inside, it was a different story. Elizabeth was their golden child, and everything about her life reflected that. She was brilliant, charismatic, and excelled at everything she tried, whether it was academics, sports, or music. She outshone everyone, including me. My parents adored her, showering her with praise and attention. Every milestone she reached was celebrated like a major event, complete with elaborate parties and expensive gifts. I was there too, of course, but more as a background character. My own accomplishments, modest as they were, barely registered. It wasn't that I wasn't trying. I did well enough in school and stayed out of trouble, but I didn't shine like Elizabeth. The difference in how we were treated became painfully clear over the years. One Christmas stands out in my mind. I was 8, and Elizabeth was 11. My parents had gone all out with the presents that year. The living room was piled high with gifts, but the centerpiece was a grand piano gleaming under the Christmas lights. Elizabeth had been begging for it for months, and my mother, who still missed her own days as a pianist, had finally caved. They were ecstatic as they unveiled it, going on and on about how Elizabeth would carry on the family tradition. When it was my turn, my dad handed me a small box. Inside was a sketch pad and a set of crayons. "We thought you might like to draw," he said with a smile. I tried to act grateful, but the message was clear. Elizabeth was the star, and I was just there. Things didn't improve as we got older. In school, Elizabeth continued to dominate. She was class president, captain of the cheerleading squad, and eventually valedictorian. Everyone loved her. Teachers sang her praises, and her peers either idolized her or envied her. Meanwhile, I struggled to find my place. I had a small group of friends, nerdy kids like me who loved video games and comic books, but I was invisible to most of the school. I wasn't bullied exactly, but I wasn't noticed either. One of the most humiliating moments of my childhood happened during a school talent show. I had decided to perform a magic act, something I'd been practicing for weeks. Elizabeth was also in the show, playing a piano piece she had mastered in a matter of days. She went first, and of course, the audience went wild. Her performance was flawless, and she got a standing ovation. Then it was my turn. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped one of my props. A few kids in the audience laughed, and I could feel my face burning. I stumbled through the rest of my act, desperate to just get it over with. Afterward, my parents gave me a half-hearted good job, but their attention quickly shifted back to Elizabeth, who was basking in her glory. Elizabeth wasn't deliberately cruel, at least not usually. After the talent show, she came up to me with that insufferable smile of hers and said, "You were great, Jackson. It's so brave of you to try." Her words stung, not because they were mean, but because they felt so condescending. I hated that I cared so much about her opinion. As we moved into our teenage years, favoritism became impossible to ignore. My parents poured resources into Elizabeth's future, paying for private tutors, expensive summer programs, and any extracurricular activity she showed interest in. I got none of that. When I asked if I could take art classes, my dad shrugged and said, "Maybe next year." A promise that never materialized. Elizabeth's charm extended to the rest of the family as well. Our relatives adored her. Family gatherings turned into endless cycles of "Elizabeth is so talented," and "Elizabeth is going to do great things." I often wondered if they even remembered my name. At one Thanksgiving dinner, my aunt turned to me and said, "You must be so proud of your sister." I nodded, biting back the urge to say, "And what about me?" Even as I tried to carve out a path for myself, it felt like Elizabeth was always one step ahead, effortlessly overshadowing me. She didn't just succeed, she excelled. And she did it with an ease that made my own struggles seem pitiful in comparison. I began to resent her, not just for how she was treated, but for how she made me feel about myself. My parents' favoritism wasn't just about praise or attention, it had real consequences. When Elizabeth turned 16, my dad surprised her with a brand new car, a sleek red convertible. She squealed with delight, hugging him and gushing about how it was the best day of her life. 2 years later, when I turned 16, I got the keys to our old family sedan, a beat-up station wagon with a busted radio and a sagging roofliner. "It's still a good car," my dad said, as if that made it any less humiliating. Elizabeth went off to an Ivy League university, her tuition fully covered by my parents, who couldn't stop bragging about their brilliant daughter. I, on the other hand, ended up at a state school, working part-time jobs to cover what my partial scholarship didn't. My parents didn't even bother to visit when I moved into my dorm. They were too busy helping Elizabeth set up her new apartment near campus. By the time I graduated, the resentment I felt toward Elizabeth and my parents had hardened into something deeper. I knew it wasn't healthy, but I couldn't help it. Every time I saw her with her perfect life and her endless string of successes, it felt like a reminder of everything I wasn't. The first time Elizabeth referred to me as her backup plan, it was meant as a joke, or at least that's how she sold it. It was during one of those rare family dinners where everyone pretended we were closer than we really were. Elizabeth was home for the weekend with her fiancé, Ryan, a stockbroker with the personality of a cardboard box but a bank account big enough to make my parents fawn over him. We were sitting around the dining table, halfway through dessert, when Elizabeth casually leaned back in her chair and said, "Well, if Ryan ever dumps me, at least I know Jackson will always be single and available." The room erupted into laughter, but I just sat there, stunned. It wasn't the kind of joke you expect to hear from your sister, especially not in front of your fiancé, Amelia, who had been sitting quietly beside me. Amelia gave me a small, uncomfortable smile, the kind that said she was trying not to make a scene but didn't find it funny either. Later that night, as we were driving home, Amelia finally said, "Does she always talk to you like that?" Her tone was neutral, but I could tell she was bothered. "Elizabeth is Elizabeth," I replied, trying to brush it off. "She thinks she's being funny." Amelia didn't push it further, but I could see the question lingering in her eyes. She didn't need to say it out loud. I was already asking myself the same thing. Over the next few months, Elizabeth's jokes became a recurring theme. She'd bring it up at the most inappropriate times, always with that same smug smile, as if she enjoyed watching me squirm. At first, I tried to laugh it off, but it was hard not to take it personally. It didn't help that Ryan found it hilarious. Hey, at least you've got a backup plan, buddy," he said once, clapping me on the shoulder. I wanted to punch him in his perfectly chiseled face. Amelia, however, wasn't amused. During one family barbecue, Elizabeth made her usual comment, something along the lines of, "Don't get too comfortable, Ryan. Jackson's been waiting in the wings his whole life." This time, Amelia didn't hold back. "That's incredibly disrespectful," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Jackson isn't anyone's backup plan." The laughter stopped. Elizabeth's face froze for a moment, then twisted into a patronizing smile. "Oh, come on, Amelia. It's just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." "I'm not sure why you think that's funny," Amelia shot back. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said anything to Elizabeth. They never did. The drive home that night was silent. I could tell Amelia was furious, but she waited until we were in the privacy of our apartment to let it out. "You need to stand up to her, Jackson," she said, pacing the living room. "This isn't okay. She's treating you like a doormat, and you're letting her." "I know," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "But what am I supposed to do? She's always been like this. If I say anything, it'll just make things worse." "It's already worse," Amelia snapped. "She's undermining you in front of everyone, and your parents just sit there like it's normal." "It's not normal, Jackson. It's toxic." Amelia was right, of course, but knowing that didn't make it any easier. Confronting Elizabeth felt impossible. She was so good at twisting words and making herself look like the victim. I'd seen her do it 100 times before. Things reached a boiling point a few weeks later at another family gathering. This time, it was my parents' anniversary party, a lavish affair at a fancy restaurant. Elizabeth, as usual, was the center of attention, holding court with Ryan at her side. Amelia and I tried to stay in the background, but Elizabeth wouldn't let us. Halfway through the evening, she raised her glass and said, "Let's toast to my amazing little brother Jackson. He's always been there for me, and I know he always will be, my reliable backup plan." The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me, waiting to see how I'd react. Amelia's hand tightened on my arm, a silent plea for me to say something. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stand up. "Elizabeth," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to sit here and let you treat me like a joke anymore." The words hung in the air like a challenge. For a moment, Elizabeth looked genuinely surprised, but then her expression hardened. "Wow, Jackson," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Someone's a little sensitive tonight." "I'm not sensitive," I shot back. "I'm tired. Tired of you belittling me every chance you get. It's not funny, and it's not okay." To my surprise, a few people at the table nodded in agreement. Even Ryan looked uncomfortable, but my parents predictably tried to smooth things over. "Let's not ruin the evening," my mom said, her voice tight. "Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it." "Yes, she did," I replied. "And you've let her get away with it for years." That was the moment I realized just how deep the dysfunction ran. My parents weren't going to change. Elizabeth wasn't going to change. The only thing I could change was how I responded to it. Amelia was proud of me for standing up to Elizabeth, but the fallout wasn't pretty. Elizabeth stopped speaking to me for weeks, which honestly felt more like a blessing than a punishment. My parents tried to guilt-trip me into apologizing, saying I'd overreacted and ruined the party, but I didn't budge. For the first time in my life, I put my own feelings above keeping the peace, and it felt liberating. Of course, Elizabeth didn't stay quiet for long. When she finally did reach out, it was under the guise of clearing the air, but it quickly became clear she had no intention of apologizing. Instead, she doubled down, claiming I had misinterpreted her jokes and accusing Amelia of turning me against her. That conversation ended with me hanging up the phone, something I'd never dared to do before. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt monumental. For the first time, I wasn't just Elizabeth's overshadowed little brother. I was my own person, and I wasn't going to let her or anyone else treat me like anything less. The family dinner started like any other. Tense, formal, and pretending to be something it wasn't. My parents had invited us all over for a special evening, a phrase that always made me suspicious. Elizabeth arrived late, as usual, sweeping into the room with Ryan at her side and an air of self-importance that was impossible to ignore. Amelia and I were already seated, making polite conversation with my parents, John and Margaret, and a few extended family members. Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, and my cousin Claire, who always seemed like she wanted to be anywhere but with us. Elizabeth barely glanced at me as she made her grand entrance, throwing her arms around my mother and exclaiming, "You look amazing, Mom! Did you lose weight?" Her charm was always dialed to maximum in these settings, and my parents lapped it up like thirsty dogs. Ryan followed behind, carrying a bottle of wine that he presented to my father like it was a peace offering. "Thought this might pair well with dinner," he said, his smile as practiced as Elizabeth's. Amelia, seated beside me, squeezed my hand under the table. She hated these dinners as much as I did, but she came anyway, trying to be supportive. I appreciated her more than I could say, especially on nights like this. The meal started without much drama, the conversation staying light and focused on Elizabeth's latest achievements. She had recently been promoted at work and couldn't stop talking about how her boss had personally requested her for a high-profile project. My parents hung on her every word, nodding and smiling like proud parents at a recital. "And what about you, Jackson?" Elizabeth said suddenly, turning her attention to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What have you been up to?" The question was a trap. It always was. She didn't actually care about the answer. It was just a way to remind everyone that whatever I said would pale in comparison to her latest triumph. "Work's been good," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Busy, but good." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "That's it? No big promotions? No exciting news?" "I'm happy with where I am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Amelia's grip on my hand tightened. Elizabeth smirked and leaned back in her chair. "Well, as long as you're happy, I guess that's what matters." The comment stung, but I let it slide. I had learned over the years that confronting Elizabeth in front of our parents was a losing battle. They always took her side, no matter what. But tonight, I wasn't sure I could keep biting my tongue. The turning point came during dessert. My mother had baked her famous apple pie, a recipe she'd passed down from her grandmother. The conversation had shifted to family traditions, and Elizabeth naturally had taken center stage. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with fake nostalgia. "It's funny how family dynamics change over time. I mean, I'll always be the overachiever, and Jackson will always be." She trailed off, waving her fork in my direction. "Elizabeth," Amelia said sharply, breaking the awkward silence that followed. "That's enough." Elizabeth blinked, feigning innocence. "What?" "I'm just saying we all have our roles. Jackson's always been the quiet one, the dependable one. My backup plan, as I like to call him." She laughed as if that made it better. Something inside me snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Do you have any idea how offensive that is? I said, my voice louder than I intended. You've been making these comments for years, and I've had enough. I'm not your backup plan, Elizabeth. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like this. The room went dead silent. My father set down his fork, his expression darkening. My mother looked as though I had just slapped her. Elizabeth, meanwhile, looked more amused than anything else. Oh, come on, Jackson, she said, rolling her eyes. You're overreacting. It's a joke. It's not a joke, I shot back. It's degrading, and you know it. You use these jokes to belittle me and make yourself feel superior. My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. That's enough, Jackson. Sit down. I turned to him, incredulous. Are you serious? She's been insulting me for years, and you've never said a word. But the moment I stand up for myself, I'm the problem? Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it, my mother said, her voice tight. You're making a scene over nothing. Nothing? I said, my voice shaking. This isn't nothing. She's been undermining me my whole life, and you've let her. You've encouraged it. Jackson, my father said, his tone warning. You're out of line. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Out of line? Do you even hear yourselves? You've spent my entire life making me feel like I don't matter, like I'll never be good enough compared to her. And now, when I finally speak up, you're telling me to shut up and take it? Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like this was some kind of soap opera she was enjoying. Honestly, Jackson, she said, you're being so dramatic. If you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you should work on your self-esteem. Amelia stood up then, her face red with anger. You're unbelievable, she said, glaring at Elizabeth. You talk about Jackson like he's some second-rate backup, but he's twice the person you'll ever be. And you, she added, turning to my parents, should be ashamed of yourselves for enabling this. My mother gasped, as if Amelia had just insulted the Queen. How dare you speak to us like that? How dare you treat your son like this? Amelia shot back. You don't even see how toxic this family dynamic is, do you? The argument escalated from there, voices overlapping as years of resentment and unspoken grievances spilled out into the open. I don't know how long it went on, but by the time it was over, I felt drained, as if I'd run a marathon. I'm happy with where I am, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Amelia's grip on my hand tightened. Elizabeth smirked and leaned back in her chair. Well, as long as you're happy, I guess that's what matters. The comment stung, but I let it slide. I had learned over the years that confronting Elizabeth in front of our parents was a losing battle. They always took her side, no matter what. But tonight, I wasn't sure I could keep biting my tongue. The turning point came during dessert. My mother had baked her famous apple pie, a recipe she'd passed down from her grandmother. The conversation had shifted to family traditions, and Elizabeth naturally had taken center stage. You know, she said, her voice dripping with fake nostalgia. It's funny how family dynamics change over time. I mean, I'll always be the overachiever, and Jackson will always be. She trailed off, waving her fork in my direction. Elizabeth, Amelia said sharply, breaking the awkward silence that followed. That's enough. Elizabeth blinked, feigning innocence. What? I'm just saying we all have our roles. Jackson's always been the quiet one, the dependable one. My backup plan, as I like to call him. She laughed as if that made it better. Something inside me snapped. I pushed my chair back and stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Do you have any idea how offensive that is? I said, my voice louder than I intended. You've been making these comments for years, and I've had enough. I'm not your backup plan, Elizabeth. I'm not your safety net, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like this. The room went dead silent. My father set down his fork, his expression darkening. My mother looked as though I had just slapped her. Elizabeth, meanwhile, looked more amused than anything else. Oh, come on, Jackson, she said, rolling her eyes. You're overreacting. It's a joke. It's not a joke, I shot back. It's degrading, and you know it. You use these jokes to belittle me and make yourself feel superior. My father's voice cut through the tension like a knife. That's enough, Jackson. Sit down. I turned to him, incredulous. Are you serious? She's been insulting me for years, and you've never said a word. But the moment I stand up for myself, I'm the problem? Elizabeth didn't mean anything by it, my mother said, her voice tight. You're making a scene over nothing. Nothing? I said, my voice shaking. This isn't nothing. She's been undermining me my whole life, and you've let her. You've encouraged it. Jackson, my father said, his tone warning. You're out of line. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Out of line? Do you even hear yourselves? You've spent my entire life making me feel like I don't matter, like I'll never be good enough compared to her. And now, when I finally speak up, you're telling me to shut up and take it? Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like this was some kind of soap opera she was enjoying. Honestly, Jackson, she said. You're being so dramatic. If you can't handle a little teasing, maybe you should work on your self-esteem. Amelia stood up then, her face red with anger. You're unbelievable, she said, glaring at Elizabeth. You talk about Jackson like he's some second-rate backup, but he's twice the person you'll ever be. And you, she added, turning to my parents, should be ashamed of yourselves for enabling this. My mother gasped, as if Amelia had just insulted the Queen. How dare you speak to us like that? How dare you treat your son like this? Amelia shot back. You don't even see how toxic this family dynamic is, do you? The argument escalated from there, voices overlapping as years of resentment and unspoken grievances spilled out into the open. I don't know how long it went on, but by the time it was over, I felt drained, as if I'd run a marathon. My parents didn't speak to me as Amelia and I gathered our things and left. Elizabeth, of course, had the last word. Well, I guess some people just can't handle the truth, she said with a smirk as we walked out the door. In the car, Amelia reached over and took my hand. You did the right thing, she said softly. I'm proud of you. I nodded, though I didn't feel proud. I felt exhausted, angry, and deeply hurt. But for the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself, and that had to count for something. The drive home from that disastrous dinner was silent for a while, the only sound coming from the hum of the engine. Amelia sat beside me, her arms crossed tightly, her face a storm of emotions. I could feel the anger radiating off her, but beneath it, there was something else, concern for me. Finally, she broke the silence. You can't keep doing this, Jackson. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. I know. No, she said, her voice firmer now. I don't think you do. Tonight wasn't just another bad dinner, it was a wake-up call. Your family doesn't respect you. They don't care about your feelings, and they never will unless you set boundaries. She was right, of course, but the thought of distancing myself from my family felt like tearing off a piece of myself. As toxic as they were still my parents, still my sister. The idea of walking away felt both terrifying and freeing. We got home, and as I dropped my keys on the counter, Amelia turned to me, her eyes softening. You deserve better than this, Jackson. You've worked hard for everything you have, and you can't let them keep taking from you, emotionally or otherwise. That last part hit me like a brick. Amelia had brought up concerns about my family's financial ties to me before, especially after I started making a decent living. My parents had a habit of borrowing money that was never repaid, and Elizabeth, ever the opportunist, had hinted more than once about how I could help her out if she and Ryan ever hit a rough patch. I had always brushed it off, thinking it was just family dynamics, but now it felt like another layer of manipulation. I need to think about this, I said finally, my voice heavy. Amelia nodded. Take your time, but don't let them guilt you into staying in this cycle. The next day, I called my friend and coworker Adam. Adam was a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who had helped me out with a few contracts at work. If anyone could give me sound advice, it was him. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. As I laid out the situation, Adam listened intently, his expression unreadable. First off, he said when I finished, you need to protect yourself. If your family has access to any of your accounts, cut that off immediately. And if you're serious about setting boundaries, you might need to consider more than just limiting contact. You might need to get legal protection. Legal protection? I asked, my stomach sinking. Adam nodded. Look, I'm not saying they're going to sue you or anything, but if your parents or sister feel entitled to your money or anything else, you need to make sure they can't take advantage of you. That means reviewing your assets, setting up trusts if necessary, and maybe even writing a formal letter making your boundaries clear. The thought of it all made my head spin, but I knew he was right. My family had shown time and time again that they didn't respect me, and if I didn't take action, I'd only have myself to blame when things got worse. Over the next few weeks, I began the process of disentangling myself from my family's financial reach. I closed joint accounts my parents had access to, updated the beneficiaries on my insurance policies, and even had Adam draft a will that explicitly stated how my assets would be handled. It felt surreal, like I was preparing for some kind of war, but it was also empowering. Amelia was my rock through it all. She encouraged me every step of the way, reminding me that I wasn't doing this out of spite but to protect myself. "This isn't about hurting them," she said one night as we reviewed the documents Adam had prepared. "It's about making sure they can't hurt you anymore." The real test came when my parents called a week later. My mother's voice was sugary sweet as she asked if I'd like to come over for dinner to smooth things over. I could hear Elizabeth in the background, laughing about something with Ryan. The image of them sitting there, planning their next subtle dig at my expense, made my stomach turn. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I think it's best if I take some time away from the family for now." There was a pause, and then her tone shifted. "Jackson, don't be ridiculous, we're family. We need to stick together." "Family doesn't mean I have to tolerate being disrespected," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I need to do this for my own well-being." She sighed heavily, the kind of sigh that was meant to convey disappointment. "Fine, if that's how you feel." It wasn't long before the guilt tripping began. Over the next few days, I received a string of messages from both my parents and Elizabeth. My dad kept it short and gruff, accusing me of overreacting and telling me to man up. Elizabeth, predictably, made it all about herself, sending texts like, "I can't believe you'd cut us off like this after everything I've done for you." But the one that hit the hardest was from my mother. "I just want you to know how much this is hurting us. We've always loved you, Jackson, even if you can't see it." I almost caved after that one. Almost. But Amelia was there, reminding me of why I had made this decision in the first place. "Love doesn't look like manipulation," she said gently. "And if they really love you, they'll respect your need for space." As time went on, the messages tapered off. My parents stopped calling, and Elizabeth moved on to other targets for her attention. It was a strange feeling, being free from their constant judgment and demands. Lonely at times, yes, but also liberating. I focused on my work, my relationship with Amelia, and rebuilding my sense of self-worth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in Elizabeth's shadow or bending over backward to please my parents. I was just me, and it felt good. But even as I started to heal, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. My family wasn't the type to let things go quietly, and I had a sinking suspicion that my decision to set boundaries would come with consequences I hadn't yet anticipated. The first sign that things were escalating came in the form of a voicemail from my mother. It was late on a Tuesday night when I saw her name flash on my phone screen. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to dive back into the family drama just yet, but the message she left was hard to ignore. "Jackson," she began, her tone clipped and formal, the kind she used when she was holding back anger. "Your father and I have been talking, and we feel it's time to discuss the family inheritance. There are some things you need to understand about how we've planned for the future. Call me back as soon as you can." Inheritance. The word sent a chill down my spine. I'd always suspected my parents would use it as a tool to manipulate me, and now it seemed that suspicion was coming true. I replayed the voicemail for Amelia later that evening, pacing the living room as I spoke. "This is them trying to reel me back in," I said, frustration bubbling under the surface. "They can't stand that I've set boundaries, so now they're dangling the inheritance in front of me like a carrot on a stick." Amelia frowned, her arms crossed as she leaned against the kitchen counter. "You don't even care about the inheritance, do you?" "Not really," I admitted. "But it's the principle of it. They're trying to control me again, and I'm not sure how to handle it." "Don't play their game," she said firmly. "If you call her back, they'll just use it as an opportunity to guilt trip you. Stick to your boundaries." I knew she was right, but the thought of ignoring the call entirely felt wrong. So the next morning, I texted my mother instead. "I got your message. I'm not interested in discussing inheritance right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Her response came almost immediately. "That's not how this works, Jackson. This is a family matter, and you need to be part of the conversation." I didn't reply. Over the next few days, the messages continued. My father chimed in as well, sending curt texts about responsibility and respect for the family legacy. I tried to ignore them, but it was exhausting, like fighting a battle I hadn't signed up for. Then, out of nowhere, Elizabeth entered the fray. She showed up at my office unannounced, striding in like she owned the place. My coworkers exchanged awkward glances as she swept past them to my desk. "Jackson," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We need to talk." I gestured for her to follow me into the conference room, not wanting to make a scene. Once the door was closed, I turned to her, arms crossed. "What are you doing here, Elizabeth?" She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made my stomach churn. "I'm here because Mom and Dad are worried about you. They say you're refusing to discuss the inheritance." "I'm not refusing," I said evenly. I'm just not interested right now. Well, you should be, she said, her tone sharpening. This isn't just about you, Jackson. It's about the entire family. Mom and Dad have worked hard to build this, and you're acting like a spoiled child by ignoring them. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure. Elizabeth, if you come here to lecture me, you can leave. I've made my decision. Her smile faltered, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something behind her eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration? But she recovered quickly. Fine, she said, turning to leave. But don't say I didn't warn you when this all blows up in your face. The encounter left me rattled. Elizabeth's sudden involvement felt calculated, like she was trying to position herself as the savior of the family while painting me as the black sheep. And it wasn't long before I found out just how far she was willing to go. A few weeks later, I got a call from Adam, my lawyer friend. Jackson, he said, his voice urgent. I found something you need to see. He sent me an email with an attachment, a financial statement linked to a bank account in Elizabeth's name. The balance was staggering, over $600,000. But what caught my attention was the list of deposits, all marked as transfers from my parents. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This can't be real, I muttered. It's real, Adam said. I double-checked. Your parents have been funneling money into this account for years, probably under the guise of helping her with expenses. Why would they do this? I asked, though the answer was already forming in my mind. Elizabeth was their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Of course they'd bankroll her life while leaving me to fend for myself. You need to confront them about this, Adam said. And you might want to consider taking legal action to protect yourself. This kind of favoritism could have serious implications for the inheritance or anything else they might try to manipulate you with. The thought of confronting my parents or Elizabeth about this made my stomach turn, but I knew Adam was right. I couldn't let this go unchecked. That weekend, I invited my parents over to my apartment. Amelia was there for support, her presence a steadying force as I prepared for what I knew would be an explosive conversation. When my parents arrived, they were all smiles, as if nothing was wrong. But their expressions changed the moment I brought up the bank account. I know about the money you've been giving Elizabeth, I said, my voice calm but firm. Over $600,000. Care to explain? My mother's face turned pale, while my father's jaw tightened. That's none of your business, he said gruffly. It is my business, I shot back. Because it's a blatant example of how you've always favored her over me. And now you're trying to use the inheritance to manipulate me. I'm done with it. My mother tried to placate me, her voice trembling. Jackson, we did what we thought was best. Elizabeth needed help. She needed help? I interrupted, my anger boiling over. While I've been working my ass off to make ends meet, you've been handing her hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do you even hear how ridiculous that sounds? The argument escalated from there, voices rising as years of resentment came to the surface. My father accused me of being ungrateful, while my mother pleaded for me to see reason. But I wasn't backing down. You've always put Elizabeth first, I said, my voice shaking. And I'm done pretending that's okay. If you want to continue this dynamic, fine. But I won't be part of it anymore. The conversation ended with my parents storming out, my mother in tears and my father muttering something about family loyalty. Amelia hugged me tightly as the door closed behind them, her support the only thing keeping me grounded. For the first time, I felt like I had truly taken a stand. It wasn't easy, and I knew there would be fallout, but I also knew it was the only way to reclaim my life. The decision to take legal action against my parents wasn't one I made lightly. For weeks after discovering Elizabeth's secret bank account, I wrestled with the implications of what it meant to sue my own family. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about the money. It was about standing up for myself and finally breaking free from the toxic grip my family had on me. Amelia supported me from the beginning, though she made it clear it was my decision to make. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, she said one night as we sat on the couch, the glow of the TV illuminating her determined expression. But if you go through with this, you need to be prepared for how ugly it might get. She wasn't wrong. I knew my parents wouldn't take this lying down, and Elizabeth would undoubtedly make it her mission to turn the situation to her advantage. But I also knew I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. The first step was consulting with Adam, my lawyer friend. He recommended bringing in a specialist, someone with experience in family financial disputes. That's how I met Lauren Green, a sharp and no-nonsense attorney who had a reputation for handling complex cases with precision. Lauren didn't sugarcoat anything during our first meeting. This is going to be messy, she said, her piercing blue eyes locked on mine. But based on what you've told me and the evidence you've provided, you have a solid case. If we can prove financial manipulation and favoritism that's impacted your inheritance or financial stability, we can argue for compensation. We began building the case, combing through years of financial records, emails, and text messages. Adam helped me track down additional documentation, including statements from family members who had witnessed the blatant favoritism over the years. My cousin Claire, who had always been quietly supportive, agreed to testify. "I've seen how they treat you, Jackson," she said over the phone. "It's not right, and it's about time someone called them out on it." The hardest part was revisiting all the moments that had led to this point. Every slight, every insult, every time I was made to feel like I wasn't enough, it all came rushing back as I pieced together the timeline of my family's dysfunction. But with each new piece of evidence, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about setting a precedent, about showing that people couldn't get away with treating others like this, even if they were family. When the lawsuit was officially filed, the fallout was immediate. My parents were furious, of course, but their anger was eclipsed by their disbelief. They genuinely seemed to think I wouldn't have the nerve to go through with it. My father called me the day after the filing, his voice cold and clipped. "You're making a mistake, Jackson," he said. "You're going to regret this." "I think the only mistake I've made is letting this go on for as long as it has," I replied, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "This isn't about revenge, Dad. It's about justice." Elizabeth, predictably, was livid. She sent me a series of scathing text messages, accusing me of tearing the family apart and betraying her. "You're nothing but a selfish, ungrateful brat," one message read. "Mom and Dad gave you everything, and this is how you repay them." I didn't bother responding. I knew anything I said would only fuel her rage. The court proceedings began a few months later, and true to Lauren's prediction, it was messy. My parents' lawyer, a smarmy man named Victor Crane, tried to paint me as a greedy, ungrateful son who was lashing out because of jealousy. He brought up every instance where my parents had helped me financially, twisting the narrative to make it seem like I was the one taking advantage of them. But Lauren was ready for him. She methodically dismantled his arguments, presenting evidence of the blatant favoritism and manipulation that had defined my upbringing. She called witnesses who testified about the disparity in how my parents treated me versus Elizabeth, and she presented the damning financial records that showed the hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled into Elizabeth's secret account. The most shocking moment came when Lauren called Elizabeth to the stand. She was visibly annoyed, her usual confidence faltering under the weight of the cross-examination. Lauren didn't hold back, pressing her on the specifics of the bank account and the reasons behind the massive transfers from my parents. At first, Elizabeth tried to deflect, claiming the money was for necessary expenses and that my parents had offered it willingly. But when Lauren presented an email exchange between Elizabeth and my mother, in which Elizabeth explicitly demanded more money to cover her lifestyle, her facade cracked. "This is ridiculous," Elizabeth snapped, her voice rising. "I don't see why this is even relevant. Jackson is just jealous because he's always been second best." The courtroom fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a confession. Lauren let the moment linger before calmly turning to the judge. "I think that speaks for itself, Your Honor." The trial lasted several weeks, each day more exhausting than the last. But when the verdict finally came, it was worth every moment of stress and heartache. The judge ruled in my favor, citing clear evidence of financial manipulation and emotional harm. My parents were ordered to pay $1.2 million in compensation, a sum that felt less like a windfall and more like a validation of everything I had endured. The victory was bittersweet. I knew the money wouldn't fix the damage my family had done, and it certainly wouldn't repair our broken relationships. But it was a start. A way to reclaim my life and move forward without the weight of their manipulation holding me back. As Amelia and I left the courthouse that day, hand in hand, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I was free. Free to live my life on my own terms, free to build a future that wasn't defined by the shadows of my past. And for the first time, I truly believed I deserved it. Moving to a new city was Amelia's idea, but as soon as she suggested it, I knew it was exactly what we needed. The court case had drained me emotionally and mentally, and staying in the same city felt like staying in the shadow of everything that had happened. The whispers, the sideways glances from people who knew my family, it was suffocating. Amelia found a place 400 kilometers away, a modest but charming apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't flashy, but it had everything we needed: space to start fresh and enough distance from my family to feel like a new chapter. Packing up our lives and saying goodbye to the city I had lived in for so long was bittersweet, but as we drove out of town that morning, I felt an unfamiliar sense of hope stirring in my chest. The new city was different, quieter, friendlier. Our neighbors introduced themselves on the first day. A retired couple named Greg and Marcia who lived across the hall. Greg was a handyman with a knack for fixing anything, and Marcia baked enough cookies to feed an army. "If you ever need anything, just knock," she said with a warm smile, handing us a plate of still warm chocolate chip cookies. I wasn't used to this kind of welcome. It felt foreign but comforting. Amelia and I threw ourselves into settling in. She started working remotely for her marketing firm, and I found a job managing operations for a local tech startup. It was smaller than what I was used to, but the environment was welcoming, and the lack of corporate drama was a relief. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The real work, though, began when Amelia suggested we try therapy. "We've been through so much, Jackson," she said one evening as we unpacked boxes in the living room. "I think it could help both of us process everything and maybe help us figure out how to move forward." I hesitated at first. Therapy wasn't something I'd ever considered. It felt too vulnerable, too exposing. But Amelia was patient, and eventually, I agreed to give it a try. That's how we met Dr. Claire Matthews, a calm and empathetic therapist who had a way of making you feel safe, even when you were baring your soul. Our first few sessions were rough. Talking about my family dredged up memories I'd buried for years. The favoritism, the manipulation, the constant feeling of being less than. It all came flooding back, and there were moments when I wanted to walk out of her office and never look back. But Amelia was there, her presence steady and unwavering, and with time, I started to open up. Dr. Matthews helped me see patterns I hadn't fully understood before. She showed me how my parents' behavior had shaped not only my self-esteem but also my relationships and decision-making. "You've spent so much of your life trying to prove your worth to people who were never going to see it," she said during one session. "It's time to focus on what you want and what makes you happy." Amelia and I also worked on our relationship in therapy. The lawsuit, the family drama, the stress, it had taken a toll on both of us, and I hadn't realized how much until we started unpacking it. But the process brought us closer. For the first time, we weren't just surviving, we were building something real, something strong. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. I've worked hard for 17 years to support my family, only to discover my wife's betrayal and that some of my kids aren't mine. Original post. Hi, I'll try to keep this short. Both in our 30s and have been together 17 years. I male 30s and am the sole provider for my family of 6, partner and 4 kids. 2 high-energy dogs. I work 5 days a week and sometimes work on weekends if we need a little more cash. My partner is a SHM and hasn't worked since our eldest was born, by her own choice. I wake up at 5 a.m. and take the dogs out. Prepare kids' lunches, snacks, ensure all school essentials such as bags etc. are at the front door, then head to work in a physically demanding job. Kids are picked up for daycare, school at 7. Due to after-school activities and clubs etc. they're not home until 6. I come home at 7 and make dinner most nights. Help with homework, do bath time for the little ones, do dishes, take dogs out for a longer walk again, put little ones in bed if the house is a mess. I will of course clean it. I pay for everything: mortgage, bills, insurance, groceries, clothes, toys, technology, after-school activities, dates, a woman to deep clean the house once a month. My partner wants to go on a 2-week-long vacation with her friends which will overlap with the weekend away I had planned with my brother who I rarely get to see as we live so far away. She wants me to cancel my trip as she's tired and needs a break. We got into an argument over it in which unkind things were said on both sides, but I am unwilling to budge on this. How do I get through to her that I need some rest? TLDR. I pay for everything, do housework, childcare etc. while my wife is a SAHM. She wants to go on a 2-week-long vacation with her friends, which means I won't be able to go on a weekend trip with my brother which was planned well in advance. We argued in which she told me I need to help out more and I basically said what's in the title. How do I get through to her? Edit/additional info. Hello all, sorry I haven't replied to many comments, but I have read most of them. I've seen a couple questions I'd like to answer and figured that making a post would be better than replying to individual comments. My children are between 16 and 6. My wife doesn't take anyone to their clubs/activities. Younger children's school finishes at 3 p.m. Their clubs are in the school. Older kids' school finishes at 3:30. They stay in a club until 4:30 and then go to a youth group with their cousins until they come home. My eldest makes their way to and from school on their own while my youngest is picked up and dropped off. Kids are of course able to eat breakfast at home, but often enjoy eating with their friends before school starts at 8. My wife doesn't walk the dogs because she doesn't like to, and frankly, they don't like her. I enjoy my time walking the dogs because it allows me some time to think. We have a large yard with dog houses, toys and some agility equipment for them to use while I'm gone. They also get mental stimulation through Kongs and puzzle toys which have been prepared and stored in the freezer. What does my wife do all day? Honestly, she's not isolated. She often tells me of things she's done with her friends, sister, mother, etc. She goes to the gym, does and enjoys hobbies such as embroidery, knitting and some jewelry design. She changes what she likes to do, says it keeps things fresh. Housework-wise, she does the laundry, I fold and distribute later. She will give dogs water and prepared meals. Enrichment. We have those robot vacuums and air purifiers to deal with the dog hair, but my wife will vacuum if heated. I wipe the countertops, put dishes in the dishwasher after meals. Older kids take care of their own rooms, bathrooms for an allowance. Have you ever not truly noticed something until it's right in front of your face? I was so mad because I wanted to go see my brother and she wanted to go on vacation with her friends. Yes, she wants me to pay for it. And things have been like this for so long that I didn't see how unfair and imbalanced things were until I truly started to look at how our duties were distributed. You've all given me a lot to think about. I'll answer some comments later. Update 1. Some of you have suggested that I enable her behavior and I'd like to address it, to explain how things got this way to begin with. My wife worked from age 16 to 20, but I'd often come home after work during the early stages of her pregnancy and she would tell me of how bad the morning sickness had been and how she was getting in trouble at work for being late or not turning up due to the issues she was having. One night, after a long discussion about things, she suggested that it would be easier and better for her and the baby if she stayed home during the pregnancy. I was reluctant at first because we weren't exactly swimming in cash, but ultimately the health of my wife and child were more important than a few months of added stress. To save money, we moved in with my wife's older sister and her husband. We split rent and utilities, but we're still saving some money. The pregnancy wasn't easy on her, she was often cranky and uncomfortable and as a result could be quite mean, rude and a bit handsy. So after further discussions with my wife and her sisters, I took on more of the household duties such as cooking, etc. When my eldest was born, my wife's sister helped with childcare while I was at work for the first year, but after she and my wife had a fight when he was about a year old, we moved into our own place. But my wife struggled during the day when I wasn't there to help, so we ultimately decided to put him in another daycare facility. I would drop him off on my way to work and would pick him up on my way back home when I finished. Once home, one of us would cook dinner while the other watched the baby. Back then we had no pets, so household duties weren't too much and could be handled by a couple hours cleaning on Saturday or Sunday when we could split it between us both. When my son was 3, my wife's sister offered to get her a job where she worked. My wife had to do an interview, but my SIL was confident she'd get the position. My wife was reluctant and nervous about returning to work, but attended the interview and was offered the job. I don't remember much of our celebrations that night, but it ended in the conception of our second child. My wife told me when she'd been at her new job for just over a month. She stuck it out for a couple more weeks, but was fired due to not turning up for shifts. I asked one of her doctors about the issues she was having so early in the pregnancy, back pain, leg pain, nausea, etc., but my wife cut me off before I could finish and asked me to leave the room. When we got home, she berated me for speaking to her doctor like she was a child and told me that if she wants something brought up to her doctor regarding her pregnancy, that she'd do it herself. I had embarrassed her because she knew her body and knew what was normal and what wasn't. I still thought the issues had to be addressed with her doctor, but whenever I brought it up her mood swings would get worse. My meal came to live with us when my second was born for a short while when I returned to work after my paternity leave. When my daughter was about 4 months old, my wife expressed that she was having difficulty looking after her by herself during the day, but my Mill, who had her own life and responsibilities, couldn't come back and stay indefinitely. We had a 2-bedroom apartment then and having her sleep on the couch didn't seem fair to me. So we enrolled my daughter in daycare while my son was at nursery. My son went to daycare after nursery as well, so I'd pick them both up around 6 p.m. and head home. My wife promised she would speak to her doctor about the possibility of depression, etc., and her mood did improve with the additional help with the children. My wife took on cooking and cleaning duties then, but struggled as well. I would often come home to burned, ruined food, and would need to make something else anyway. So I ended up cooking dinner most nights so we wouldn't be wasting food. During a weekend away for a friend's wedding, when my daughter was 5, I suggested that my wife go back to work. Both kids were in school now, and I thought we could improve our lifestyle with 2 incomes. We had recently bought a house because the apartment was too small for us and the children needed their own rooms. She seemed hesitant, which I understood after being out of work for so long, but she agreed. She applied for several positions but had no luck with interviews or callbacks. We found out she was pregnant with our third not long after that, and returning to work was put on hold again. The pregnancy was difficult as expected, but again my mill came to stay when I had to return to work. She stayed for a while but had to return to her own home eventually. Before she left, my wife told me that she feared she would struggle with our second daughter just as she had the first 2. I tried to reassure her, but she seemed to become insanely depressed the second her mother left. I would return home with the 8 and 5-year-old to a screaming baby and nothing done around the house. Her mood and actions affected the entire house. So reluctantly I put her second daughter in daycare as well, but I told my wife she had to talk to her doctor and that we'd no longer be having any more children. She was, and we had a huge fight about it. But I got a vasectomy and she accepted it. We've always used protection. My wife is on birth control and I always use condoms, but given that it had already failed twice for us, when my first was conceived after my 21st I was so drunk I don't think I wore one, our second after celebrating her new job, and our third at our friend's wedding. I didn't want it to happen again. But obviously the universe had other plans for us, and our third daughter was born 2 years after our second when we were celebrating a promotion I'd gotten at work. Obviously this is a brief summary of events, and there have been several other moments through the years when I've suggested she go back to work, but I thought I'd try to provide further background for those who are curious about how we got to where we are. Someone asked if my wife has had a break recently. She has never taken 2 weeks away before, but she goes away a couple of times every year for weekend trips with family and friends. The longest she has been gone is a week. In regards to the dogs and why they don't like her, she doesn't like them. She thinks the mental stimulation I provide through Kong toys, games, puzzles etc. is unnecessary, but freaks out if their energy levels are too high. One is a German Shepherd which I was gifted for my birthday, and the other is a German Shepherd Malinois mix my wife brought home because she thought our GSD needed a friend. Yes, they have been to training and were originally in doggy daycare for the first couple years. On to the update. Update 2. So, as one of you suggested, I took a day off of work. I genuinely wasn't feeling too good either, but I intended to speak to my wife about the situation while the children were at school. Kids all left for school by 7-ish. My wife came downstairs at 11:45 and seemed very shocked to see me. She asked what I was doing at home and I explained I took a sick day as I wasn't feeling well. The first words out of her mouth were, "But we need the money, you don't look that bad." I made a face, and she quickly asked what was wrong and asked if she could get me anything. I asked for water and we sat on the couch, but soon her phone rang and she went off into the kitchen to talk. She came back a while later and asked if I wanted to get something to eat, and I said we could make something from the kitchen. She said she wanted to go out and I said we could order takeout, but I wasn't in the mood to go out. The dogs had been sitting by the chest freezer waiting in the pantry for their lunchtime enrichment for 10 minutes now, and I asked if she was going to feed them. She flopped onto the couch and asked me to get it. I said no. She asked again, and I said no, again. She glared at me, but eventually got up and gave it to them. She asked me to take her out again several times, and I kept saying no. I was starting to get a migraine, which I told her, but she kept asking, suggesting we could go shopping, she could get her nails done and we could enjoy the day together. I refused, said we had something to talk about, and she said we would then go upstairs. She came back down 40 minutes later dressed up and said if I wasn't going to take her out, she'd go herself. I tried to get her to sit down so we could talk, but she blew me a kiss at the door and rushed outside without even locking it. While she was out, I took some of your advice and canceled the cleaning lady we have. I apologized to her, as I really did like her, but she was very understanding and I think we parted on good terms. She returned home at 8 p.m. and immediately asked where dinner was. I told her the kids and I had already eaten. She asked where her dinner was and I told her she'd have to make something for herself. She said she'd just order something and I told her no. This gave her pause and she looked at me like I'd just told her she had to starve. She said she couldn't cook and so told her I know she's perfectly capable of making something. We have plenty of food, it's not like she has to be Gordon Ramsay to stick a tin of soup or something on the stove. She left again, and returned 30 minutes later with McDonald's for herself, which set the younger kids off. Yes, they'd already eaten, but she walked in the door finishing her burger and drink with an empty bag and McFlurry tub. Our youngest asked why she didn't bring her any ice cream, and my wife said Daddy said I wasn't allowed to. I did not say this, and I swear it took more strength than I'd like to admit not to yell at her in front of our daughter. When the kids were in bed, I asked her to sit and talk about the situation regarding our trips. She asked if I'd rescheduled with my brother, and I firmly told her no and that I wouldn't be. I tried to have a conversation. I explained I felt our duties were incredibly uneven and that I'd like for her to take on more responsibilities with the children and the house. She argued that she does enough, and I asked her to make a list. She put laundry down, feeding the dogs, making doctor's appointments and grocery shopping. And I brought out my own list with everything I've told you guys so far and added that I created the dogs' meals. She simply has to give it to them. I fold and distribute laundry, take kids to doctor's appointments, and that the groceries are ordered through an app on her phone, delivered to the house, and I put them away. She got up then. I asked what she was doing and she said she was going upstairs. I didn't argue. I didn't want it to resolve an argument and wake the kids up. She was visibly shaking with anger. A while later I went upstairs as well. She was on the phone to someone, and when I entered the room she demanded I leave and go sleep on the couch. I refused and climbed into bed. She hung up the phone and demanded again that I sleep on the couch, and again I refused. She grabbed me and physically tried to drag me out. That resulted in a fight, and I ended up sleeping on the couch because she was going to wake the kids up again. The following days were much the same. I have stopped folding and putting away her laundry. I do it for myself and the younger kids, and my two oldest take their piles and put them away themselves. I still cook for the kids, but have told my wife that she has to make her own meals. Petty, I know. I think my eldest heard us arguing because he asked if he could take the dogs out for a couple walks with his friend during the week. He hazes, and he says he's enjoying it, but I think he and my wife had an argument the other day because he's been very distant with her and things just feel off. He's asked me about 3 times if I love him, or course I've told him there is nothing he could ever do to make me not. Yes, I've tried to talk to him about it, but he doesn't want to talk yet, and I need to respect that. I think pushing him could be a mistake. Thursday night my wife asked if we could have a drink as I had to leave on Friday to see my brother. I had one, but honestly it went right to my head and honestly just wanted to sleep. She kept trying to initiate sex, but I wasn't in the mood. I woke up Friday morning and my wife was gone. So was her suitcase. I've texted and called, but there's been no answer other than a text telling me we'd talk about it when she's back. She ignored me and went on her trip regardless, and I am furious. I have left her some cash in the bank account. She has the card too, but have removed everything else into another account. I had to tell my brother why I wouldn't be coming to see him, and he arrived here on Saturday with my nephew and 2 nieces. The house is very full, but honestly it feels more open than it has in a long time. The kids seem relaxed and so do the dogs. I don't know what will happen with my wife, but I am done. I can't afford a lawyer right now, and unfortunately I don't know anyone who could give me a deal or do me a favor, but this marriage is over. It should have been a long time ago. TLDR. Wife and I talked, had an argument, she went on trip regardless, and my brother is here with his family. This sub only allows 1 update, so if I post anything further it will be on my own profile. Relevant comments. OOP on if his wife might have undiagnosed health problems including PPD. OOP. I spoke to her doctor about the issues she was having because she would not. He asked her what was happening, how she was, and she would say the pregnancy was fine. She was having no issues yet at home. All I got was how hard things were, how ill she felt, how sore she was. Screaming, yelling at me. I went to bed because I am 6.5 and work a physically and mentally demanding job. It is not good for my body to sleep on a 2-seater couch. I wanted to sleep as I had work in the morning. She escalated and got physical, not me. She made the argument worse, not me. Undiagnosed PPD? She has been to her doctor who had diagnosed her with nothing. She told me so herself, and as for me knocking her up, it takes 2 people to create a child. We do not live in America, and my wife is pro-choice. If she wants to terminate, she has the ability to do so. I told her after our second was born that I didn't think having more kids was a good idea, and she insisted. I said the same thing after our third and after my vasectomy, and she lost her mind. Let her go on vacation and feel like herself for the first time in forever. Did she not feel like herself when she went on multiple weekends away last year with her friends? Does she not feel like herself when she's hanging with the girls for lunch dates throughout the month? Do you know the last time I saw my brother in person? Before the pandemic. He is here to support me. If you want my wife to go on vacation so I can't, then it's perfectly reasonable that my brother can come to the home I pay for when I need him. Are you my wife? Update 3. I'm not going to add this to the post as it's already long enough. Please excuse any spelling mistakes as I'm so tired. Thank you all, but I'm not in America. I know a lot of you have suggested I message her telling her I'm going to divorce her, etc., but I think I'm going to play it cool, act like I've accepted her decision so she's not on guard. I know she said something to my son, but he won't tell me what it is, and I feel like if I push him to, he might not ever, but my nephew and him are hanging out a lot. They're close despite not seeing each other much, so I'm hoping he might confide in him and maybe open up. I'm not just letting this go, we will talk, but I don't want to push him too much. I am not a lightweight, I can drink. But I have been exhausted, and I mean very exhausted for some time now, and I think that maybe that's why I passed out after having one drink. But I would be lying to myself and to you if I said I wasn't suspicious. I am suspicious a lot now. I swear, I'm not an idiot, but I really feel like one now. Some of you have suggested that I get the kids' DNA tested, especially my youngest, and while I know that this is likely something I'll have to do, it breaks my heart to think that they're not mine. My girls all look the same, just older versions of each other, so if I have to DNA test the youngest, I have to do them all. I never wanted kids. This is why I've always used condoms. I'm not the biggest fan of them, but I love my own. I love these kids, regardless of the DNA test. They are mine, but I fear if it comes back that they're not. It could damage our relationship. My brother has read my posts and spent the last days telling me everything he hates about my wife, obviously not in front of the kids. He's pretty funny, and I feel like I haven't been able to laugh like this in a long time. He says he's going to make a Reddit account. Lord knows what he'll say. Writing this update has opened my eyes further. I see how the timing of wanting her to go back to work leans up with each pregnancy, but when these things are years apart, and you're concentrating on supporting the family and work, your brain sometimes pushes these thoughts away until something triggers them again, and boom, you're slapped in the face with the realization that your entire relationship is potentially built on a mountain of lies. She has her phone and iPad with her, so I can't check any of that. But I'm going to be going through her stuff. Is it in envisioning privacy? Likely. Do I care right now? No. I feel like I've wasted the majority of my life, the good years, and that feels horrible to say when I have 4 kids. I promise I don't mean that they're a waste. As I said in the post, this marriage is over. I am done. My kids deserve better, but I won't be alone when I confront her. As I said, she can get handsy, and no, I have never retaliated, and I don't want to be put into a position where I need to. I thank you all for your comments, your insight, your kindness. I know I haven't replied to many comments at all, but don't really have time to do so when there are so many, but I am trying to respond to DMs as that seems like the easier thing to do. I want to ask my Sil what actually happened with my wife and that job. But I don't want her to know I'm suspicious. My Sil is a kind woman, but she is my wife's sister, so her loyalties lay with her, I suppose, and I don't want to alert my soon-to-be ex. Does anyone have any ideas how I can do this? Seems odd to bring up a job my wife had for a very brief time years ago. I wish you all the best. Relevant comments. OOP on the accusations for not respecting his wife's needs and wants. OOP, how do I not respect her needs, wants? I pay for everything and do the majority of the child, pet care and housework. I have not gone on vacation in years because I was providing for my family. I have given her everything she's wanted for the past 17 years, and she couldn't give me a weekend with my brother. Why couldn't we both go on vacation? Because I don't randomly have the money to fund 2 weeks away for her. I can't just up and leave my 16-year-old to look after 3 younger kids and 2 high-energy dogs. I couldn't take them with me because that would mean multiple plane tickets and accommodations, food, etc. for them, as well as dog sitting, boarding for the dogs. New update. Hello all, I'm sorry it's taken so long to update. Things are not good. While this update will be small, I will try to do a longer one when things are a little better. Yes, we are separated and will be getting a divorce. My FIL has graciously offered to help. It's taken me so long to update because, as most of you already knew, some of the children aren't mine. My eldest son is mine, my 3 daughters are not. I found out not long after my first update. And while I thought I could handle the news clearly, my body couldn't, and I had a heart attack. Thankfully, my brother was with me and called an ambulance. I am recovering, but Jesus Christ scared the shite out of me and my family. As some of you may remember, when my ex left for vacation, I took the majority of the money out of the account she used but left some as I didn't want to leave her stranded. That money, about 500 or so, was gone in a few days. She used her own money that she's been making from OnlyFans to fund her trip. Yes, I'm serious. She has only a fan account. My son had offered to take the dogs out for me during his lunch/free class time and walked in on his mother making content. In the living room. She told him that I wasn't making enough money for the family to survive and that she had to be the only fan to help support us. She told him I was ashamed and embarrassed and that I would be very unhappy and hurt if he mentioned it. She told him that doing so could ruin our marriage and could lead us to divorce. My in-laws know everything, as my brother had to call them to help watch my kids while I was in the hospital. My FIL is furious and my MIL is just devastated. She keeps apologizing to me, like she's the one who betrayed me. My ex moved out. She tried to make me leave so she could stay in the house with the kids, but after a conversation with her father, she's renting a place. My eldest daughter and my son know the girls aren't mine. My ex told them after they said they didn't want to go live with her at her new place. My mill was with them at the time and, according to my daughter, began screaming at my wife for her behavior. My youngest two don't know yet. But they will. This isn't something I can keep from them forever. They already know that something is up. I've cut my hours back at work and have been able to work from home. It's obviously a desk job for now, but I am thankful to my boss for working with me on this. I came home to find out that my mill and one of my sills had cleared out my wife's hobby space and made it an office den for me. I am very grateful for their support during this. I know it can and be easy to take the side of your daughter, sister's ex-partner during a breakup, but I appreciate them. While things aren't great by any stretch of the imagination, I feel strange. Things seem calmer without my ex in the house. There seems to be more laughter around, and even the dogs appear more at ease. But I am so angry, which obviously isn't good for my heart. I've wasted a huge chunk of my life raising kids that aren't mine in a marriage that was messed up from the beginning. Now please, don't take what I said as me saying I regret my girls. I don't at all. They are smart, beautiful, cheeky little weirdos in love with all of my heart. But the betrayal stings. The fact that I've been working my ass off for years and she's been making thousands on OnlyFans and been keeping it to herself stings. I am ashamed, humiliated, embarrassed, angry, relieved. It's a mess of emotions in my head. But I know I'll get through it. Hopefully, I need to for my kids and dogs. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer in the comments. My husband finally cut ties with his toxic mom and sister after they demanded we give up our house for my jobless sister-in-law and her family. My in-laws have a very toxic connection with my spouse and it is beginning to ruin my life. Growing up, my husband was my favorite, the golden child, and my mother-in-law was very close to him. Jacob has informed me that because his father was so busy at work, he and his mother spent a lot of time together. However, I've noticed that his sister, Sarah, is not treated equally by my mother-in-law. Although I am confident that my mother-in-law loves both of her children, I have repeatedly observed that she prioritizes my husband. I'm sure Sarah felt the same way growing up, which is why my husband has always attempted to fill the void by being a kind elder brother to her and always being there for her. But the truth is that Sarah and my mother-in-law would sometimes behave in such a ridiculous manner that it crossed the line. For example, when we initially started dating, Jacob, a recent college graduate, and my in-laws, including Sarah, shared a house. My in-laws had offered my husband a totally own level so that he could have his own privacy and welcome whomever he pleased. This is why he would occasionally invite me to his home to spend the night with him. However, several times in the morning, Sarah would storm into our room while we were asleep without knocking. As you may guess, we were not always properly dressed, but she would act as if everything was normal and begin talking to Jacob about utterly random topics. This was very strange for me because I was uncomfortable with her seeing me in my lingerie. Before anyone points out, I absolutely understand that Jacob was living with his family at the time, so I should have expected this, but is knocking on the door before entering really that much to ask? I suppose siblings can be quite close, but she and I didn't know each other very well when Jacob and I first started dating, so I thought it was really rude. Naturally, I spoke with Jacob about it and informed him that I would not be going over unless he installed a lock on his door. He agreed. But as you can guess, Sarah, who attempted to storm into the room the next morning but was unsuccessful, began ranting at us about why the door was locked. She began jiggling and hammering on the door, begging her brother to let her in. Jacob eventually let her in, and she stormed into the room, asking why he had set the lock in the first place. When she recognized me, she pointed to me and began ranting at him, asking if it was because of this skank, I was astonished by how harsh and insulting she sounded. Jacob told Sarah that he wanted to install the door lock, but Sarah was not convinced. She angrily informed him that they were siblings and should not keep any secrets between them. Jacob told her that he had no secrets, and that he had put the lock so she wouldn't barge in when we were asleep, which was quite disturbing. Sarah violently flipped her head towards me and exclaimed that it was all my fault, saying that I was interfering with her and her brother. This was too much for me, as I am generally non-confrontational, so I excused myself to visit the restroom. I could hear her yelling, with Jacob attempting to calm her. When she eventually left, Jacob came in to comfort me. He apologized for her actions and informed me that he would speak with her again so she could apologize to me as well. When I arrived the following weekend, Sarah apologized and offered me a pitiful excuse, claiming that she needed to speak with Jacob urgently and so believed it would be good for me to come in. Jacob forcefully asked her not to bother us again, and she agreed sheepishly. Although this issue appeared to be remedied, it was not the only strange conduct she demonstrated towards Jacob. If Jacob and I differed on something, even something as trivial as movies, and Sarah was around, she would begin telling him that he should date someone with comparable likes, meaning that we were unsuitable for each other. Jacob would give her a condemning look, but she would simply smirk. Another episode was Sarah asking me awkward questions about my background in an attempt to delve into my life. Jacob and I had been open about our past since the beginning, but I didn't feel comfortable addressing it with his sister. Regardless of my thoughts, she would ask me questions like, "Why did your ex break up with you? Were you not suitable for him?" Can make remarks like, "My brother's previous girlfriend was far more attractive than you." All of these queries and comments arose when she and I were alone. I began to suspect that she was trying to play a game with me, bringing me down. I initially kept my lips shut, but as the situation progressed, I had enough. One day, I responded to her taunting by stating, I liked my ex-boyfriend's family better than Jacob's because he didn't have nosy, overbearing family members. Sarah was taken aback by my reply, which temporarily silenced her. Even though Sarah had a strange relationship with my husband, my mother-in-law was no exception. When I first entered Jacob's life, my mother-in-law ignored me, but once she discovered we were serious, she began acting as if I was attempting to steal her son away. She would purposefully ignore me at dinners and family gatherings, as if I did not exist. Jacob saw this occasionally and tried to talk to her, but she never changed. My mother-in-law once referred to me as stuck-up and spoiled, just because my parents put me to a private school while she was a public school teacher. I also know she tried to talk Jacob out of marrying me, telling him he should look for a better spouse. Fortunately, my spouse did not care about her view and proposed to me nonetheless. My mother-in-law and Sarah were shocked to learn that Jacob had proposed. Both contacted me, telling me that it was a horrible decision and that, because Jacob wouldn't listen to them, I should quit the relationship and return the ring. I found this quite strange and declined, stating that they were crossing a line by asking me to do something like that when I loved Jacob and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. When they realized they couldn't persuade me, my mother-in-law reluctantly changed her mind, telling me that I should strive to be the best wife for him and care for him in the same manner she did for years. I was rather offended, but I tried not to take her remarks too seriously. Sarah, on the other hand, accused me of being a gold digger and claimed her brother deserved someone with higher status. She even threatened to expose me before our wedding so Jacob would not marry me. Following this conversation, I immediately spoke with Jacob about everything. He was taken aback by how disrespectful they were towards me. He challenged them, but my mother-in-law and Sarah continued to believe that I was unsuitable for him. Jacob told me to disregard them, assuring me that he loved me regardless of their opinions. Despite his reassuring remarks, I felt horrible that his own family would not embrace me. Jacob and I had already chosen to pay for our wedding ourselves, so when my mother-in-law offered to cover half of the cost, we politely declined. Despite Jacob's reassuring remarks, I felt horrible that his own family would not embrace me. Jacob and I had already planned to pay for our own wedding, so when my mother-in-law offered to cover half of the costs, we politely declined, with Jacob explaining how hard we had worked to save money specifically for this occasion. Instead of being happy for us, she became even more angry, and she began telling Jacob how sad she was that he no longer needed her. However, Jacob's father appeared to be quite pleased with us. Unlike his sister and mother, his father was very calm and never had any issues with our connection. Since my mother-in-law continued to complain to Jacob, we made a compromise by telling her that we would love for her to organize the rehearsal dinner for us. She agreed, and we appreciated her generosity. However, when the wedding approached, events took an unexpected turn. The first instance came when Sarah invited herself to join us for supper, telling Jacob how much she missed him. Jacob and I were living on our own following our engagement, so we assumed she genuinely wanted to spend time with her brother. We agreed, and Jacob asked me directly if I was comfortable with having supper with her. I reluctantly consented, not wanting to be nasty to my soon-to-be sister-in-law. While we were enjoying our dinner, Sarah abruptly began discussing how much she despised cheating partners, claiming that cheaters were nothing but useless pieces of trash. We stared at her, curious about where she was headed with this. Then, out of nowhere, she looked me directly in the eyes and asked how it felt to be a useless piece of trash. My brow furrowed in perplexity as Sarah began to rant, accusing me of having an affair with my co-worker Zach. Jacob, also perplexed, asked her what she meant by saying. Sarah proudly hauled out photos of me and one of my co-workers, waving them around and claiming that she had caught me red-handed. I knew I'd never been unfaithful to Jacob, so I was curious as to why she assumed I was having an affair. Looking through the photos, they appeared to be entirely innocent. It's true that Zach and I were close co-workers, but only because we started at the same time and helped each other out when we made mistakes, so our manager wouldn't criticize us. Zach even had a girlfriend, which Jacob knew about. I don't have a lock on my phone, and I've always been open with Jacob about all of my colleagues. Sarah had turned these pleasant moments caught in photographs into something they were not. Evidence of a fictitious affair. In truth, they were far from it. Her false charges irritated me since it was obvious she was attempting to damage my reputation and disrupt my connection with Jacob. Before I could defend myself, Jacob, stunned and plainly upset, moved in to help. He questioned Sarah why she was following me around and photographing me with my co-workers in public places without their permission. When Sarah heard this, she began rationalizing her behavior, claiming she simply wanted to investigate me because I was not of their status, and she was scared I was marrying Jacob to steal his money. Jacob told her unequivocally that her charges were false and that she was creating extra drama out of nothing. He tried to reason with her, telling her to stop spreading lies and attempting to destroy our relationship, but Sarah insisted that Jacob open his eyes to the obvious affair that was going on. I also tried to clarify that we were only co-workers, but Sarah insisted on her charges. As her charges grew more serious, the environment became strained. I had had enough and informed her that I was going to make a police report against her for illegally photographing and stalking me. Her look grew terrified as she inquired whether I was serious. I informed her I had all of the evidence. She had purposely tracked me and took these images without my permission, attempting to slander me with ludicrous lies. Sarah stared at Jacob and then back at me, arguing that she did everything to protect her brother and that it wasn't a big deal. She began imploring Jacob to speak with me, worried that if I filed a complaint it would jeopardize her profession and future. I strongly told her that she could only save herself at this time. Sarah inquired what I wanted. I assured her I wouldn't pursue the complaint if she kept away from my life. Sarah had no other option for escaping the situation at that point. She looked to her brother for support, but Jacob defended me, telling her that she should be grateful I was willing to let it go because what she had done was clearly wrong. Sarah reluctantly agreed to stay away from me, and we have not spoken since that day. Jacob still has a relationship with her, but she has never spoken to me again. The second incident occurred shortly before our wedding, at the rehearsal dinner. My mother-in-law, who had insisted on planning the meal, rebuffed our offer of assistance in any manner. She told us that she would take care of everything. However, when we arrived, it was evident that the preparations were far from what we had anticipated. The rehearsal dinner had plastic tablecloths on picnic tables and chilly Mexican food. My mother-in-law was upset throughout dinner, which marred the festive atmosphere. She drank excessively and began behaving inappropriately with the guests, repeatedly stating how she couldn't wait for the wedding to end and how stressful it had been, despite the fact that she had not contributed monetarily or assisted with the planning. Eventually, my father-in-law became irate and escorted her away. Sarah attempted to excuse her mother's actions, but my father-in-law refused to listen. As you might guess, the entire affair was a fiasco, and I began to worry that both my mother-in-law and Sarah would wreck the wedding the next day. That night, Jacob and I had our first disagreement. I informed him strongly that he needed to uninvite Sarah and his mother because, based on their actions, they would surely try to overshadow us at the wedding. My husband angrily protested, promising me that his father would be present and would not allow them to get away with it. Frustrated, I promised that if he didn't uninvite them, there would be no wedding the following day. Jacob was plainly taken aback by my demand, and even knowing how extreme I sounded, I was concerned about what they might do. I did not want to be embarrassed again in front of my family and friends on our wedding day. Jacob definitely lacked firm boundaries, but I hoped that this ultimatum would make him realize how much his family was interfering with our relationship. Thankfully, Jacob understood and made the proper decision. He called his father early in the morning to inform him that his mother and sister were uninvited. Phil didn't appear startled and promised Jacob that he'd make sure my mother-in-law and Sarah didn't show up there unexpectedly. Shortly after our chat with Phil, my mother-in-law and Sarah began contacting Jacob constantly, apparently trying to persuade him to let them attend the wedding. However, Jacob forcefully told them that he did not feel comfortable having them there because of how they had treated me throughout our relationship. Hearing this, my mother-in-law began accusing me of being a terrible influence and interfering with her relationship with her son. Sarah attempted to argue with him, but Jacob was certain in his decision. I felt horrible that Phil couldn't attend our wedding because of his wife and children. I even felt sorry about issuing the ultimatum. But all of my remorse vanished when I discovered from some of Jacob's cousins that Sarah and my mother-in-law had intended to wear white dresses to our wedding. The cousins informed me that in their family WhatsApp group, which only had female members, Sarah had encouraged the others to wear white as well, stating there was no reason for the bride to be the only one. I was astounded by how low they would go just to hurt me. After knowing this, I was relieved they hadn't been invited. Jacob missed his family, but he could see where I was coming from. Overall, we had a lovely wedding, and no one tried to outdo us. Since that day, my mother-in-law and Sarah have stopped talking to me entirely, which I am absolutely okay with. They only invited Jacob around for dinner or special events, which didn't bother me at all. Phil, on the other hand, was always kind to me, and we stayed in touch over the years. Jacob and I painstakingly saved money and finally purchased a new home this year. It was our first home, and we were overjoyed to own something so meaningful. Jacob's parents and Sarah did come to visit for a modest housewarming celebration, but I went to see my parents and spent time with my family instead. Now, to the major point, my mother-in-law contacted me unexpectedly last month. This was really surprising because Mom and I hadn't spoken since the day I married Jacob. Surprisingly, she casually inquired about my well-being and life circumstances. I was taken aback by her unexpected interest, but I responded pleasantly. Then she questioned how it felt to live in such a spacious house with only Jacob and myself. Her remarks stung since Jacob and I had been trying to conceive for a long time but were unable to do so owing to infertility concerns. Jacob and I had mourned the thought of never having children, but we gradually accepted it. When I first got the news, I informed Jacob that if he wanted to marry someone else and have children, he could divorce me. But Jacob had always stayed by me, assuring me that it was fine to be childless as long as we had each other. Our families were aware of this, so my mother-in-law's comment was very painful. She then told me Sarah was pregnant again. I was astonished because this would be her 6th child. Jacob had told me how her husband was unemployed and did not believe in using contraception, which resulted in these accidental pregnancies. Sarah's boyfriend was the embodiment of laziness, doing nothing around the house to aid her or the kids. I've heard from Jacob that he treats Sarah like a personal maid. He never pays any bills in the house. Sarah works many part-time jobs, while he spends the entire day gaming. Regardless of how much everyone has talked to her, Sarah never breaks up with him. My mother-in-law then went on to add that because Sarah could no longer afford to work during her pregnancy, she thought Jacob and I should give up our apartment because it was too big for a childless couple like us. I was caught aback by her demand and struggled to find words. I inquired whether she was joking, but my mother-in-law responded that she was serious, that Sarah and her husband deserved to live in a larger house. However, because she did not have enough space in her own home to accommodate them, she invited them to come in with us. The weight of her news weighed in the air as I fought to keep my composure in the midst of the emotional storm. I emphasized to her that this was our house, which we were still paying for, and the idea of someone else moving in without our permission was intrusive and ludicrous. However, my mother-in-law said that she had already spoken with Jacob, who had allegedly consented to this. This was strange because Jacob and I were always open with each other, and I knew he would have told me if he had agreed to let his sister and her family stay with us. I firmly told my mother-in-law that because the house belonged to both me and Jacob, he couldn't grant permission without my agreement. No one was allowed to reside here unless both of us agreed. To reach a solution, I told her that I would be pleased to accommodate Sarah and her husband for a few days if they wished, but that they could not stay permanently. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, began yelling, arguing that as a responsible daughter-in-law, I was required to make room for Sarah and her husband. She also assured me that if I complied with her demands, all previous troubles would be forgiven. In rage, I cynically said, "Sure, I'll be pleased to let them take our place. But you see, we're still paying for it, and I'm confident that if Sarah and her husband move in, they will not assist with the mortgage or bills. So how about you take some responsibility and contribute to their living expenses? I'd be grateful if you could just cover the mortgage, and we'll manage the rest. Of course, with only one job, you'll definitely need a second one to cover the home payments. Please let me know when you intend to get that second job." Hearing this, my mother-in-law exploded in wrath, shouting and voicing her dissatisfaction. She said it was crazy of me to want her to pay the mortgage, and I responded that it was equally ridiculous for her to expect us to care for Sarah's family and allow them to move in. This infuriated her even more, and she continued to yell, while I smiled with satisfaction. She eventually disconnected the call when she saw I wouldn't give in to her demands. Soon after, Sarah called and yelled at me for daring to ask her mother to pay our mortgage. She went on to add that she had always known I was a gold digger. I informed her that she was the gold digger, attempting to live with us without contributing. I added that if she wanted to know who the true gold digger was, she could look at her own partner, who did nothing to assist her. This appeared to silence her. I firmly told Sarah that she could argue with me all she wanted, but I would never let her family into our home unless they agreed to help with the mortgage. She accused me of being cruel and putting money before family. The tables had turned, and I was relieved at the thought of sticking up for myself and refusing to back down, taking control of my home. However, I feel a little awful thinking about my ex-husband, and I'm here on Reddit wondering if what I've done makes me the villain. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who has expressed their support. To answer the most crucial question that everyone keeps asking, why would my mother-in-law demand such a stupid thing of us? It's because she has always been so entitled. Clearly my husband has tolerated this charade for far too long, and he and I need to sit down and have a serious discussion about it. It's heartbreaking how my mother-in-law can lie about her own kid in order to get her way. My sister-in-law is a pawn in her game, doing whatever her mother-in-law wishes because my mother-in-law has always favored my husband. Sarah simply listens to what her mother says in the hopes of garnering favor as well. In this situation, Sarah stood to benefit because she could rely on us to pay her expenses and care for her children while her useless husband did nothing. I'm waiting for my spouse to return from his business trip so we can discuss. I do not want to discuss this over the phone since it is too important. Update 2. It's been 3 days since I last updated. As I indicated earlier, I was waiting for my husband to return. When he returned, we finally sat down and talked. I told him how his mother had called and demanded that we give up our house to his sister and her family. Jacob was definitely taken aback, so I gave him the whole story. He subsequently said that he had no idea about any of it. Prior to his journey, his mother had only told him that his sister was pregnant. That was all he knew about the situation, and he had no idea his mother would make such unreasonable demands. I informed him forcefully that I expected him to speak with his mother and deal with the matter because I couldn't bear his family anymore. He agreed. Jacob confronted his mother and questioned why she had lied to me about him. When caught red-handed, my mother-in-law attempted to backtrack, claiming that she had not actually lied. She said that she knew Jacob would have no objections to his sister staying with us, so she took matters into her own hands and approached me personally. Jacob stopped her off and questioned why she thought he would be fine with Sarah and her entire family coming in. My mother-in-law explained that because Jacob and Sarah were close, he would naturally want to support her by allowing her family to come in. Hearing this, I closed my eyes in disgust, but remained silent, allowing Jacob to handle his mother. Jacob then firmly told her that he was not going to let Sarah, her unemployed husband, and their 6 children move in with us. He also stated that she had no authority to compel us to take care of them. My mother-in-law started yelling, stating Sarah desperately needed aid at this time. But Jacob informed her it was not our job, and if she wanted to help, she could care for Sarah herself. My mother-in-law then said that Phil didn't want them in their small house, although we lived in a larger house and could easily help out. She even had the audacity to suggest that, since I was childless, assisting Sarah's children would make me feel fulfilled. My eyes widened with surprise, but for the first time, I noticed Jacob's face shift color. He raged at her, stating she had no right to say such rude things about me and couldn't use it to compel me to care for Sarah's children. Jacob went on to say that Phil didn't want anything to do with Sarah since she had turned into a child-birthing machine and that he was over both of them. My mother-in-law tried to backtrack again, but Jacob would not have it. He informed her that he had done his best to keep a positive connection with them, even after they had repeatedly disrespected me, but he couldn't take it any longer. My mother-in-law begged him, but Jacob assured her that this was our home and I was his wife. Anyone that offended me disrespected him as well, and they did not deserve to be in his life. Jacob ended the call with those final words. Since then, he has not spoken with Sarah or his mother. Phil summoned Jacob to speak, and after hearing the entire story, he understood why Jacob had made such a severe move. Phil apologized to me on behalf of his wife, but I informed him that it was not his responsibility. Update 3. It has been an interesting 2 weeks. A lot of people suggested that I install cameras around our house in case my mother-in-law and Sarah wanted to show up and cause a commotion. So I purchased several cameras online and installed them. As luck would have it, they showed up last weekend, banging on my door while I was alone at home. When I saw them through the camera, I quickly called Jacob, who told me he was on his way. I answered the door, and there they were, my mother-in-law and Sarah, both furious. They requested that I let them in, but I refused and told them that if they had anything to say, they could do so from the outside. My mother-in-law began ranting at me, accusing me of being callous, greedy and selfish. I politely informed her that this was our home, and they had no right to enter uninvited. She continued her tirade, unknowing that the cameras were recording every moment. I reminded her of our prior chat, emphasizing that I would not give up our house for Sarah and her family, and that if she had anything else to say, she could wait for Jacob's return. Sarah then began yelling, accusing me of breaking up the family for no reason, being a gold digger and attempting to take her brother away from them. I informed them that everything they said was being recorded and that I would use the footage to obtain a restraining order if necessary. Their eyes widened in surprise as my mother-in-law exclaimed that I wouldn't dare to do that. I smirked and informed her that if they did not leave the property immediately, they would receive a legal notice very soon. This worried them, and Sarah tried to convince me that I was overreacting, saying that it wasn't a big problem. Fortunately, Jacob came at that exact moment. He approached them casually, asking what they were doing. My mother-in-law raced to hug him, but he resisted and forcefully demanded why they had come. Sarah stated that I was attempting to control his life by separating him from them and that they had come to face me. Jacob reiterated that it was his decision to avoid touch, and he did not want anything to do with either of them. My mother-in-law begged for forgiveness, but Jacob merely told them to leave the property or he would call the cops. They were visibly taken aback, apparently not anticipating this reaction from him. Jacob went on to say that if they ever came up at our house again, we would contact the police and have them removed forcibly. They fled, devastated, but Jacob no longer cared. I was relieved that my spouse had finally spoken up for me. Jacob has now spoken with Phil, who was as surprised as we were that my mother-in-law and Sarah had gone behind his back to show up unexpectedly. Phil informed us that we were correct not to let them in and expressed disgust with their behavior. With Jacob being so stern about kicking them out, I doubt they'll dare to return to our property. If they do, I will contact a lawyer right away. I am relieved that my husband has finally learned how toxic his family is, and I hope this is my final update. I'm ready to move on from this circumstance and continue our lives peacefully. Boss reprimanded me for not answering an email in 4 minutes. Now I'm wondering if I should quit due to her unreasonable demands. I've been at my new job for just over a month and have very grave doubts about whether it's going to work out. I'm finding it impossible to make my supervisor, Martha, happy. Her criticism is frequent, harsh and in my opinion, often very unreasonable. The incident that has me writing to you happened today, when she reprimanded me in writing for failing to answer an email in 4 minutes. To set the scene. Earlier this week, Martha and my other boss, I support 2 teams but it's an uneven split. Unfortunately my primary boss is the awful one, had a meeting with me in which Martha told me all the things I was doing wrong and what needed to change. I'm trying to understand where she's coming from, but I'm just not used to a work situation like this. She proudly describes herself as a micromanager. She doesn't appear to know the word has a negative connotation. And is looking for constant immediate responsiveness, over-communication, her words, and accountability. I understand she's the boss and it's her call, but it's a hard adjustment. I'm not used to being watched so closely. Every job I've had, the boss has been concerned with results, not with knowing exactly where I am every minute, hearing back from me instantly, etc. All week, I've worked so hard to keep her happy and show her that I took the conversation to heart. Then today, I received an email, in which Martha was CC'd, from a senior partner asking for contact info for one of our clients. I saw the email come in while I was working on a project for the other boss. I made the apparently grave error of not stopping instantly, but instead finished up the line in the Excel sheet I was working on, then opened the email and began gathering the requested info. Before I had finished, Martha replied to both of us, sending the partner the requested information, the wrong information for the record, but I'll get to that later. I saw her email, which arrived in my inbox a whopping 4 minutes after the email from the partner, stopped working on my response since it was no longer necessary, and went back to the project I'd been working on. Then I get an email from Martha. Jane, this would have been a great opportunity to build a relationship with the partner. Why didn't you dive in and assist? 4 minutes, Allison. 4 minutes. A bathroom break can take 4 minutes. I just feel like she's determined to hate me. I tried so hard all week to do everything exactly the way she likes, and she still found something to criticize. If she wanted me to answer the email, why didn't she give me a grace period of, maybe 5 minutes before answering it herself? Also, as I said earlier, she gave him the wrong information. He asked for the email address and she gave the physical address, which to me seems like she was so eager to answer the email, so that she could blame me for not answering it, that she rushed and sent the wrong info. By the way, if I sent incorrect information to a partner, she would act like it was the end of the world. But it's no big deal when she does it. Also, for the record, I understand some things are very time sensitive. I still think 4 minutes is kind of a stretch, for almost any situation, but I also want to make it clear. This was not an urgent request. It could have waited 5, maybe even, 10 minutes. I'm not asking whether my boss is being reasonable here. I'm very confident that she isn't. My question to you is, do you think I should start looking for a new job? I just feel like this is such an unreasonable criticism that there's no way I'm ever going to make this person happy. She either has no idea how to manage people or has developed an instantaneous hatred for me and will continue to find things to criticize no matter how hard I try. I've been so stressed out since I started this job, worrying about messing up, which not surprisingly, is probably leading me to mess up more. Is this salvageable or should I start looking for an escape plan? Update. Your response was really helpful. Martha had already fucked with my head so much that she really had me doubting myself. So much so that I honestly thought you might take her side and ask me, but why did it take you 4 whole minutes to answer the email? So for you and the commenters to reassure me that yes, she was being unreasonable was really helpful. As for an update. Reader, she fired me. Yes, I took your advice and started looking for a new job. She fired me before I could find one. The 4-minute email happened about a month after I started and I got fired just under the 3-month mark. The reason given was that I was making too many mistakes and that they couldn't trust me with my assignments. I'm curious how it's going with my replacement, if things like accidentally saving a draft to the wrong folder, in your first month at a new job, qualify as fireable offenses. I mess up sometimes, more than I normally do. But I think it's because of how Martha treated me. She was so volatile that I didn't feel comfortable asking questions, and she also would just disappear fairly often. She can disappear for 3 hours. I'm in trouble for missing a phone call because I was using the restroom. So a lot of times I had to make my best guess, and yes, amazingly, my best guess was always wrong. She was always coming after me with artificially compressed deadlines, so I usually had to send her work without having the amount of time I'd prefer to proofread, double-check, etc. Sometimes I thought she was moving the goalposts. Often she would say, "I told you to do X not Y," and I'd think, though I'd never say it out loud lest I face her wrath. "I don't think you did actually." And sometimes it was 100% clear that she was just inventing reasons to berate me. See, for example, 4-minute email. When I got the email that I wrote to you about, I knew deep down that she was just never going to let up. Clearly, she would find something to criticize whether I did something wrong or not, and in the end probably fire me, or bully me until I quit. That played out many times in the weeks before my firing. If I made a minor mistake, she lost her mind. If I didn't make a mistake, she would invent one. For example, she would email me to say things like, "The meeting has been over for 30 minutes. By this point you should have emailed me to ask what our next steps are." Maybe, but see above hesitancy to initiate contact with a volatile boss who finds fault with everything I say or do. I absolutely couldn't win and it was just a horrible, stressful, demoralizing experience. The good news is that I did find another job that I'm much happier with, though the first few weeks were very tough as I tried to put the experience with Martha behind me. I was afraid to ask questions, thought I was about to be fired every time I made a mistake, etc. But as time went by and it became clear to me that I was now working with reasonable people, it got much better. While I didn't get out in time, I'm grateful for you and the commenters because, as I said, it helped me to keep some perspective in the face of a person doing her best to destroy my faith in my basic competency. I really wish this hadn't happened to me, and while I'm happy in my new job, and it's a bump in both title and salary, I actually now have Martha's job title. Seriously, suck it, Martha. I would never say it happened for a reason. Or that I'm grateful for it in any way. The fact that someone could bully me like this, be 100% in the wrong, fire me, and get away with all of it is really hard to accept. But all I can do is look forward. Husband wet the bed, threw a tantrum and is now refusing to speak to me after I told our daughter the truth. I'm feeling confused and isolated. This morning, I, 28F, woke up because the sheets I was sleeping on were damp. I believed our 6-year-old daughter had been in an accident, but to my amazement, it was not her. My husband had wet the bed. After showering, I woke him up and informed him what had happened. He initially denied it, but eventually acknowledged he had peed the bed. He sprang out of bed, horrified, and began ripping off the blankets. Because our kid was still asleep on the opposite side, he couldn't get them off, which I found amusing. He became angry and told me it wasn't amusing, so I stopped. The only thing his yanking off the sheets did was wake up our daughter, who was perplexed and inquired what was going on. He didn't say anything and kept fumbling with the sheets. When he didn't respond, I informed her that he had wet the bed. He froze and gave me an odd expression, like if he was about to cry or something. Our daughter inquired why he had soiled the bed, and because he was still silent, I calmly explained that accidents do happen. He just stood there, staring at me with a lethal expression. I am not exaggerating when I say he looked at me with utter hatred. I've never been terrified of him, but for a moment, I thought he was going to hit me. Then he dropped the bedding on the floor, exited the room and locked himself in the bathroom for nearly 45 minutes. When he came out, he quickly changed and went, saying, "You can take her to school." He did not even look at me. I was annoyed by his behavior, but I let it go since I didn't want to dispute with him when he was in such a foul attitude. However, when I returned home from work, he was still brooding and ignored me. I was still annoyed by his conduct, so I told him to get over it. That wetting the bed wasn't the end of the world, and stop taking it out on me. At this point, he accused me of humiliating him in front of our daughter. I thought that claim completely ludicrous on so many levels, so I furiously reminded him that he disgraced himself by wetting the bed, not I. He did not take it well, shouted at me and walked off to his computer. Now he won't talk to me, and I'm bewildered. I believe he was the one who acted inappropriately and immaturely, and I do not believe I did anything wrong. Maybe my last comment was harsh, but I believe he deserved it. Still, I'm wondering if I was too mean. Edit 1. I simply wanted to clarify that I did not advise our daughter to be mean or disgrace my husband. I informed her since I didn't know what else to say and it was very evident what had occurred. I felt it was best to be honest. I didn't say it in a humiliating way, but rather casually and without making a huge issue about it. I didn't expect my hubby to feel this horrible about it. Edit 2. For whatever reason, someone shared a link to a claim about my husband having cancer, which is false. Neither my husband nor I have cancer. Update 1. I reviewed my original post and realized that I needed to elaborate before providing an update. I felt empathy and cared for my hubby. I spoke gently to him after waking him up. However, his reaction caught me off guard and it couldn't have taken more than a minute for him to hop out of bed and lock himself in the bathroom. After that, I thought it was best to leave him alone. I realize I was wrong for informing our child, but I didn't do it to be mean or embarrass him. It was a stupid and terrible decision, and I regret it. Furthermore, it is difficult to show someone you care while they are being neglected. I contacted him after he left to see if he was okay, but he left it as read. I inquired again when I came home, but there was still no response. I asked if we could discuss it. Again, no reaction. I asked if he could explain why he was so angry with me, but he didn't say anything. I gave up and went to prepare dinner. After supper, I implored him to quit ignoring me. No response. When I inquired if he wanted me to leave, he said, "You can stay, I don't care." So I asked him again whether he'd stop ignoring me if I stayed, and when he answered no, I was done. While I don't think it's fair to ignore someone like that, I know I handled it horribly, and I feel terrible for being so nasty to him. Anyway, I texted him early this morning to apologize and to see if he was available to talk after work. Around midday he texted me okay. We met at home, and he was obviously cool and spoke little. I apologized for everything, for laughing, for informing our child, for asking him to get over it, and for the most shameful part, telling him he disgraced himself. He remained silent the entire time, and after I finished, he just questioned why I had told our child. I explained, and then we sat in silence for what seemed like eternity. Then unexpectedly, he said, "I scared you, right?" I told him that short and he did. He claimed he could feel it. I inquired what caused him to react so aggressively, but he didn't know. He simply said he panicked when he realized he had soiled the bed, and it grew worse when I told our child. He stated he was furious with me for it. I apologize again for making him feel this way, and he apologized for scaring me. I'm not going to go over everything we said after that. It was a long conversation. To summarize, neither of us is pleased with how we behaved, and we both apologized for it. He wasn't as outraged as I had assumed about my laughter, but we agreed I shouldn't have informed our child. However, he is no longer upset about it and does not consider it to be a significant concern anymore. We both agreed that he shouldn't have neglected me in that manner, and I handled it horribly and harshly. We have accepted each other's apologies, but I still feel guilty about being so rude to him. Update 2. To begin with, because there were questions regarding why my husband peed the bed while sober, I attempted to persuade him to see a doctor after so many of you suggested it. But he flatly refused, stating it was meaningless because they would do nothing regardless. He's wet the bed once before, and both times he was weary and stressed out. So that could have been the cause. I'm not sure. This is becoming long, so if you simply want to read about my spouse divorcing me, you can stop right now. My second post was composed shortly after I had apologized. Based on the initial replies to my first post, I assumed that I must be a bad person and felt sorry for him. But to be honest, I never thought my original actions were particularly awful, and I still don't. That is not to say that I did not deserve some of the hate I received. I certainly did, but some of it was simply filthy, and some of the things I was reviled for never occurred, save in the minds of commenters. I felt terrible since the effect of my actions was so dreadful, despite the fact that I had no intention of hurting him. So the apology was genuine, and by the time of the second post, I was relieved we were on speaking terms and hoped we could put this behind us. It turned out that I couldn't. Shortly after, I realized I was still concerned by his actions. I also began to receive more remarks from people who noticed problems with his behavior, which I appreciate because it confirmed to me that it was most likely serious. What I purposefully left out of my first post in order to get unbiased feedback was the fact that my hubby can be unstable at times. He can be immature and sensitive, struggles to regulate his emotions, particularly rage, and is sometimes difficult to understand. It's probably due to mental health concerns, which isn't fair to him, and I feel terrible about it. But sometimes I just find him annoying and exhausting. I guess I was called out for it in my first post. He'd been in contact with a mental health team for years, but if they hadn't prescribed his prescriptions, he would have stopped seeing them long ago. Anyway, I was getting weary of constantly catering to his mood swings and failing to confront his concerns. So his exaggerated and, in my mind, threatening reaction to our child peeing the bed and me notifying him felt like too much, even though I knew he was hurt. As I mentioned, I had never been intimidated by him before, so it bothered me, even though he did nothing. I tried to talk to him about what happened again, particularly why he became so angry that I felt intimidated. I even questioned him whether it had anything to do with him peeing the bed as a child, based on some suggestions in the comments about him being shamed for it. He simply stated that it did not, and it was evident that he did not want to discuss any of it, so I did not press. He's tough to talk to about feelings or relationship concerns, which may be really irritating for me. To be honest, I had some reservations about staying in this marriage, but they were not severe at the moment. Then around a week before Christmas, he made an unexpected suicide attempt, which was unfortunately not his first. I didn't see it coming and I still feel terrible about it, probably always will. His recall of the preceding hours is hazy, but he insists that he did not mean to harm himself when he left our house that night. But I should have known. It was bad, and we didn't know if he'd make it or in what condition. Fortunately, he lived, but with no long-term consequences. The aftermath was terrible, and when he returned home, he was really ill, lethargic for weeks. The quick answer to why he did it is that he obviously had an excessive amount of anxiety that he wanted to escape, along with his occasional complete lack of impulse control. He made it obvious that it had nothing to do with anything I had done. I had no idea how horrible he was feeling because he did not inform me or anyone else. It's very difficult to help him when he won't tell us how he feels. It terrified me, and it scared him as well, to the point where he knew he needed more support. He's taken it more seriously than he ever has before. When he was offered therapy, he accepted. Now that the wait time is ludicrous, he will begin in October. In the interim, he has been visiting a nurse and a psychiatrist. By April, he was back to normal and he returned to work in early May. Then we discovered I was pregnant. It was unintentional and the result of a birth control error on our part. Despite all of the obvious reasons why we should have terminated the pregnancy, we chose to continue with it. We didn't take this decision lightly, but it was what we wanted. I should mention that he was a complete mess throughout my first pregnancy, and the second, we have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, was equally difficult for him. But for some reason that escapes me now, we expected things to be different this time around. And it was for a time. At 12 weeks, we discovered that there were actually 2 babies. I know it's bad, but I'd be lying if I said we were delighted about it at first. However, by that time, we had already decided to have a baby, so we both agreed to proceed with it. After digesting the news, we became quite enthused about it. I'm 23 weeks pregnant and things had been going well until yesterday. When he arrived home from work, he was unhappy. I assumed he had a hard day at work, but when I questioned about it, he responded with an angry diatribe about how dumb we were for having the babies and how we should have terminated them. I was stunned, and when I asked why he was saying that and pointed out that it wasn't a good thing to say, he just said, "Well, you asked, and it's what I feel." I didn't want to talk to him while he was like that, so I told him we'd talk later, when the kids were asleep. When they were done, I asked him what it was all about and where it came from. He said he didn't know, like he does when he doesn't want to discuss something. I tried to push a little but went nowhere. I was frustrated and told him it wasn't fair to say such things and then refused to discuss them. He remained silent for a long time before saying, "Expletive this," and locking himself in the restroom. When he came out, he appeared depressed. I inquired whether he was all right, and he indicated he needed some air. I assured him it was all right to feel sad. However, he objected and vehemently stated that he was not sad. I know I should have let him go, but I had a horrible feeling. I requested him to remain, but he didn't like it and screamed that he didn't want to expletive stay, before slamming the door so violently that the kids woke up. After he departed, all I could do was tend to the children, pretend everything was well and hope he returned safely. I was very worried. When the kids fell back asleep, I contacted him to see if he was okay, and then I cried. He responded almost immediately with, "I'm okay. I'll be home at 5, sorry. I love you." Which relieved some of my anxiety, but I remained unhappy and angry. He returned shortly afterwards, definitely high but calmer. He is not addicted but he does use it occasionally. When he noticed I was crying, he apologized. I told him I wasn't good with him treating me that way, and we had the same talk we'd had before. Him apologizing and me explaining how hurt I was. At that point, I realized I wasn't even angry anymore, though I probably should have been. I simply asked him not to run away like that again. He said he wouldn't, but deep down I know he will. We went to bed after that, but I was unable to sleep. To be honest, I haven't felt fantastic today. I'm terrified, disappointed and feel extremely dumb. When my husband arrived home today, he was in a better mood. He was such a sweetheart. He even spoke to me. He apologized for yesterday and expressed disappointment in himself for his actions. He stated he's been working so hard to act like a normal person, his words, and is weary of failing all the time. I know he's trying and doesn't always fail, so I advised him not to be too hard on himself. I asked how he was feeling, and he replied that he wasn't feeling well, but he couldn't clarify. When I inquired how horrible not well was, he stated it wasn't too bad and I shouldn't worry. He promised to let me know if things grew worse, but I'm not sure I can trust him. I'm terrified he'll crash again, and I'm not sure I have the energy for it right now. I am quite sure he doesn't either. I really hope that treatment will benefit him, but I'm not sure what we can realistically anticipate from it. What if it doesn't make any difference? What should we do then? I know my posts have primarily focused on the negative, so it may not appear that way, but I adore my hubby. I don't want to live without him, but I also don't want to live this way. I'm not sure, maybe I'm just excessively sensitive right now, being pregnant and all. Family and fiancé pressured me to reconcile with my dad, who left for his new family, but I refuse. Now I'm left feeling isolated. When I was 13, my father had an affair, left my mother and moved in with his affair partner, whom we will call Janet. My sister and I used to see him every weekend, and I have to confess that he was a decent father, but I never liked Janet. When Janet became pregnant and they had a son, our visits became less frequent, and my father became more worried about his new family. He missed some of my performances and my sister's competitions because he was preoccupied with his son. Janet chose to relocate when I was 16 years old in search of a better job. My sister and I begged him not to leave, but Dad simply responded, "I need to prioritize my family." He moved 10 hours away, which effectively destroyed our relationship. I decided to maintain no contact because it was evident he did not consider me family. My younger sister remained in contact with him. He would try to call and invite me to visit my sister, but I refused. When he returned to see my sister, I refused to talk to him when he arrived at the house. I did not invite him to my high school or college graduation. I'm now 33 and have had no touch with him. He has tried to contact me several times over the years, and his family has reached out on his behalf. I've avoided family gatherings in case he attends, such as my sister's wedding and baby showers. My father and his family returned to our hometown 3 months ago, and he has been tireless in his efforts to reconcile. My half-brother and sister have both expressed interest in a relationship with him, stating that he is an excellent father. My father found out I'm getting married and has been attempting to contact me, even speaking with my fiancée. Janet messaged me, stating I had continually broken my father's heart, that I am sad, and that I should get therapy. I reacted, calling her a expletive, and then blocked her. Everyone seems to be urging me to accept him back into my life. I'm weary of being harassed and unintentionally running into my father and his family in town. Whenever I see them, I simply walk away and refuse to speak. People keep telling me he's a decent father who did his best to stay in touch, but I pushed him away. The pressure is immense. My mother, sister, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and even some friends all insist that I reconcile. Even my fiancé has begun to question my decision to exclude him. Update 1. I recently chatted with my fiancé and regrettably things didn't go well. I've had enough and want to run away. My fiancé, whom I will refer to as Larry, is aware of my background with my father and Janet. I stated that his siding with my father and pressing me was harming me, and that as my fiancé, he should be supporting me. Larry informed me that he cannot support me in doing anything that he believes is bad. He said he spoke with my father, heard all sides of the story, and believes we can resolve things if we sit down and chat. I told Larry I didn't want to communicate with my father and asked why he was talking to him. Larry revealed that his father, who is acquainted with my father, pushed him to contact him. He then informed me that my father adores me and has always wanted to be a part of my life. He even has images of me, which I believe he obtained from family because my social media is private. Larry stated that my father is heartbroken over our estrangement and that I was unfair in asking him to move away when I was young. He also claimed that I started off on the wrong foot with Janet and that I was not to blame for the relationship's failure. Finally, he informed me that everyone can see the truth except me, and that I should look in the mirror since I am the problem. Needless to say, I burst out crying and asked him why he was doing this to me and not supporting me. Larry claims to love me, but he won't stand by and let me be a cruel expletive. After he said this, I stood up, told him that he shouldn't marry a cruel expletive, and left. I am currently sitting in my car and my phone is blowing up with Larry attempting to call me, but I do not want to speak with him. I feel as if I'm losing everything and everyone, and I have no idea what's happening. Update 2. I know many of you are encouraging me to break off all contact with my family and leave town, but it is not an option for me financially. I wouldn't be able to start my business somewhere because I've invested all of my money in it and have only recently generated a consistent revenue. Relocating is not viable. I adore my friends and family and don't want to cut them off. I grew up in this town, and I'm not ready to leave. I did not intend to write another report so quickly, but a lot has transpired today. First, I agreed to meet with my father to discuss and persuade him to back off and leave me alone. I requested my mother to arrange it for him and no one else. I wasn't sure he'd agree, but within 15 minutes of her calling, he was at the door. I requested my mother to stay and mediate. To paraphrase the talk, my father is in therapy and invites me to join him for family sessions. He wants me to spend one-on-one time with him, to stop being harsh and mean to his children, and to believe in them. He also demanded that I stop trash-talking Janet and invite him and his family to my wedding, including asking him to walk me down the aisle. I, on the other hand, want him to quit talking to my friends and asking others to speak for him. I want him to keep Janet away from me totally, and I agreed to be courteous at events and around town as long as he does not try to hug or chat to me. My mother reminded him that he was being unrealistic about some of his desires, particularly those involving Janet and his other children. For the time being, we've agreed that I'll attend 3 therapy sessions with him as he schedules them. My mother also believes I require individual therapy. He will cease interfering with my life and relationships, keep Janet away from me and ask his children to give me room. I will be courteous with him in public as long as he respects my personal space and does not approach or press me. I still haven't spoken to my fiancé. He arrived at my mother's house, but she refused to let him inside. He keeps blowing up my phone, as do his family and friends, and telling me to listen to him. During my meeting with my father, I discovered that he had paid for the majority of the vendors and services for my impending wedding, and they have been on speaking terms for far longer than I had anticipated. Larry had told me that his family paid for these items and I believed him. I feel betrayed by him, and I no longer trust him. I know I'll have to talk to him someday, but I don't feel ready yet. Update 3. First and foremost, the contract with my father is off the table. He couldn't even go a week without crossing my limits, thus there will be no therapy sessions with him, and I will maintain no contact. After deciding on a course of action, keeping Janet away from me, asking his kids to back off, and respecting my personal space, it only lasted 3 days. Everyone looked pleased that I had forgiven my father and told me so. My sister was thrilled that I was willing to give him a chance, and under duress, I agreed to have dinner with just her and my father. When my sister and I arrived at the restaurant to meet our father, he wasn't alone. He had invited Janet, my grandparents, his son, and daughter. He stood up and attempted to hug me. I immediately grew agitated, wondering why they were there. My father informed me that if we wanted to mend our relationship, I needed to embrace Janet and my younger siblings. I tried to leave after telling him that he had broken our agreement and that he should never contact me again. He wouldn't let me go and took hold of me. When I say all hell broke loose, I really mean it. I began shouting at them, and my father, Janet, and grandparents attempted to gaslight me and persuade me to sit down. When that didn't work, things became heated, resulting in a shouting battle. My father and Janet said many horrible things, including comments about my appearance and dubbing me a psychopath. My half-brother left the restaurant and my half-sister began to cry. My sister astonished me by defending me and accusing my father of wrecking things after I had finally given him a chance. She even slapped Janet. My sister took me out of there and apologized to me. I believe this was the first time she had witnessed Janet's interactions with me and how she handled me. She kept repeating she couldn't understand how Dad had spent years professing he would do anything to get me back, only to sabotage the relationship when he finally had the opportunity to re-establish it. My father has tried to contact me, but I have blocked him and refused to speak to him. I also refuse to speak with my grandparents. My father has tried to get my mother and sister to talk with me, but I believe he has burned his bridges with them. The conflict in the restaurant has spread and some people appear to be backing off. As I already stated, what my father and Janet said to me was inexcusable, and because we live in a tiny town, it spread quickly. Hopefully, individuals will back down, and those that continue to support them will be forced out of my life. My sister is very unhappy with my father and Janet and she refuses to speak to them. She blames them for my continued lack of communication. She is not allowing them to see her children either. I'm not sure if my sister will reconcile, but she is furious right now. My mother is also furious, and she appears to have had a few choice words with my father and Janet. She has agreed not to force me again to communicate with him. I'm going to start individual treatment since I believe I really need it. I feel awful for my half-siblings because they have done nothing wrong. I may be willing to have a distant relationship with them in the future, but I'm not ready yet, and I'm not sure I ever will be. I did send them a note on Facebook to apologize and assure them that they had not done anything wrong. Finally, to inform you all on my fiancé. I chatted with him yesterday about everything. I'd been radio silent since walking out on him. Essentially, he was pressured by his father to speak with my father and was offered a sob story about a misunderstood parent who really wanted to be involved in his daughter's life. Larry was unhappy with me for refusing to attend his family functions and for leaving his mother's birthday party when I realized my father and Janet were present. He was under pressure from his family to not disrupt their activities, and all he wanted was for everyone to be happy and get along, clearly at my price. Larry said that my father had paid for some of the wedding suppliers, but he didn't realize it until after the event was over. His father had informed Larry that he and his mother had paid for everything. My father had informed Larry that it was his way of giving. Larry also revealed that my father had instructed him to speak to me on his behalf. I informed Larry that he had abused my confidence and I couldn't imagine marrying someone who didn't support me. He came down in tears and apologized to me, promising never to do it again. Larry was upset and asked for another opportunity. To all of you who expected me to end our relationship, I apologize for disappointing you, but we will try to work things out. Aside from this incident, he has been the ideal partner, and I sincerely believe he was duped by his family and my father. Larry has sworn to stand up to his family and have no contact with my father. I'm still living with my mother because I need space, which I won't have if I move back home. We will contact our wedding vendors next week to discuss our alternatives. Larry begs for a postponement rather than canceling the wedding completely. We may still break up because actions speak louder than words, and I want to see if he can rebuild what we had and demonstrate that I can trust and rely on him. My father has been attempting to reach me, but I've blocked him. Larry has sworn to stand up to his family and have no contact with my father. There's no point in changing my phone number because I've done it before and my father always gets to acquire it again. Larry is open to the possibility of ending their relationship. I'm giving him an opportunity to show me that he means what he says. I always felt I had a good relationship with Larry's family, but I was definitely mistaken. I'm not asking him to have no contact with them, that is up to him, but I will absolutely separate myself from them. Any additional occurrences will result in no contact. If we are still together and have children, I will not trust his family with them. Update 4. I've cancelled the wedding. I was able to receive some returns, but I lost some money. Larry begged me not to cancel the wedding, but I couldn't marry him after what he'd done. I was determined to give him another chance, and he promised me he would maintain low contact and stand up to his parents, issuing an ultimatum that we would not allow any communication with my father and Janet. He agreed that we would not attend any gathering or party to which they were invited, and that we would not allow any attempts to force contact with my father. Larry met with his family to explain the situation, but when he returned from the discussion, he was agitated and appeared to have changed his mind. He tried to persuade me that his family only meant good and that he couldn't avoid touch with them because he loves them. He also stated that he couldn't control their friendships and tried to reassure me that it wouldn't be an issue in the future. He claimed his father would speak with my father and ensure he acted appropriately in my presence. As soon as I heard this, I started thinking about the remarks I'd read. The primary one is that if we had children, Larry might take them to his family, which includes my father and Janet, and I would have no control over it. At that point, I understood I couldn't trust Larry and would never be able to. I broke up with him. Larry isn't taking it well and constantly begging me to accept him back, swearing he won't contact his family. His family and friends are pleading with me not to stop the relationship, but he has made his decision and demonstrated to me that he lacks courage. I do not need him in my life. In reference to my father, I am considering obtaining a restraining order. Given what transpired at the restaurant, I may be able to, but I'm not sure yet. My acquaintance is assisting me in investigating the matter. My father has kept a low profile since last week, with the exception of a few attempts to apologize, and I haven't heard anything from him. My sister still refuses to speak with my father or Janet. Unlike me, my sister is very confrontational and has attacked them on social media about what happened at the restaurant and other earlier events that I was unaware of. When my sister and Janet ran into each other in town, they had a very public yelling match, with Janet demanding that my sister remove her posts. It concluded with Janet assaulting my sister. My father reportedly sided with Janet in this, and now my sister despises Janet and refuses to speak with our father, who is also attempting to reach her. My father's and Janet's reputation appears to have suffered as a result of the restaurant event, my sister's battle with Janet, and several Facebook posts about them. Individuals are gossiping, which has worked well for me since some individuals have backed down, which I am pleased about. Unfortunately, a few people continue to support him, including my ex's parents. There hasn't been much news about my half-siblings recently. I've located a therapist, but there's a bit of a waiting list before I can begin therapy. I'm still living with my mother, who is completely supportive, and I've found a cat that I'll pick up next week. Update 5. I'm still at my mother's house and I've got my tiny kitten. I named her Sasha, and she is the loveliest thing, yet quite lively. I'll try to take pictures for people who request them, but she won't stay still long enough for a decent shot. I already love her, and my mother continues to be my rock. I'm still waiting for treatment, but I'm finding Reddit beneficial and therapeutic, and the majority of the people here have been quite kind and helped me see things more clearly. So many thanks to everyone. As for my ex, Now that we've split up, I feel lighter and more free. Being away from him has made me realize all of the red lights in our relationship that I was previously unaware of, and I feel like I escaped unharmed. Luke, who is using real names because my blogs were discovered, is not dealing well with the separation and has taken over my father's role in continually disturbing me. If you read this, Luke, we're done, and I won't change my mind. So stop phoning me, coming to my house, or sending me flowers. I'm moving on, and you should too. My sister, Emma, is still on my side and has moved on from Janet, the step-monster. My sister informed everyone about Janet's affairs and they are no longer communicating. Janet is still trying to preserve face, claiming my sister is lying and telling everyone that we are the worst and have treated her terribly throughout the years, attempting to ruin her marriage. I don't think anyone believes what she is saying. Janet has sent hateful mails to both myself and my sister. When we ran into her, she yelled at us and threatened us. My sister's car has been keyed and my store windows have been broken. Unfortunately, we can't prove anything, but she's the most likely suspect. My half-siblings are undoubtedly my father's children. They were tested years ago when she was a baby. According to what I've heard, they're not speaking with Janet at all. My father seemed to have grown a spine and kicked Janet out. She is currently living with her parents, according to what I've heard, and he is considering divorce. I haven't spoken with my father since he apologized for everything in a text message. Regarding a restraining order, I'm more concerned with obtaining one against Janet at this time. I have cameras, but you can't tell if it's her due to the angle. I'm getting fitted for better covering. The damage is already done. My father had a chance to make things right with me, but he squandered it. I just want to be alone and get on with my life. Update 6. My father and Janet are still together. They split up for a period but are now back together and maintaining a united face, despite the fact that she is a cheater. Apparently, they tried again for the sake of their children. Strangely enough, my father and I are in a better place. We text periodically and are friendly when we see each other. He has ceased pushing for a relationship and is now respecting my space. We can now be in the same room without generating a commotion, and we've even had the occasional coffee together, which to be honest, is all I ever wanted. He even provided me with my education fund without any restrictions attached. My step-siblings and I have begun to communicate and follow each other on social media. My stepsister occasionally comes to my workplace to assist. I knew they were not to blame, and I was being unjust to them. They are still furious with their mother, but they have to live with her. They're giving her the quiet treatment, as far as I can tell. I still despise Janet, but at least she isn't bothering me. Unfortunately, I was unable to obtain a restraining order against her owing to a lack of proof. I avoid and do not speak to her, and I believe my father has warned her. My sister is conversing with our father again, but she despises Janet and would not have anything to do with her. She goes out of her way to exclude Janet from everything she can, and my sister and I have become closer. As for Larry, we are not and will never be back together. He hasn't entirely accepted it, but things have settled down and I'm no longer hounded as much. He still wants to get back together, but I am not interested. His friends and family will come to accept this. He believes that because things are better between my father and me, I would soften and forgive him, but I can't trust him. As for me, I've started treatment and am working through my issues. I've recognized that my relationship with my father was not entirely his fault, and I share some of the guilt. I spent my life behaving as if he had abandoned me while in reality I had pushed him away. My business is doing great, so I'm just focused on myself right now. I, 29M. Think that my girlfriend, 26F, is only with me because she can't be with her best friend, 26M. Should I just end the relationship? Sorry for the long post, I didn't realize how much I had to say until I got it all typed out. Thanks in advance to anyone who reads all this. I've been with my girlfriend Jordan for a little over 2 years, we live together and we have 2 cats. Up until this weekend I genuinely thought everything was perfect in our relationship, which I know is what everyone says in these posts, but I really was thinking that I was going to ask her to marry me sometime in the next year. We don't ever get into arguments. Jordan is very sweet and easygoing and normally we just mesh well on everything. Honestly, if everything in our relationship hadn't been so good up until now I probably would have just broken up with her this weekend. But because things have truly been so perfect I'm not sure if maybe I'm jumping to the wrong conclusion about what to do because my feelings got hurt. The other person who's important in this story is Jordan's friend Mark. She's known Mark for their whole lives because they both grew up in the same small religious community. Jordan isn't part of that religion anymore, She decided to leave the church when she was I think 19 and moved to the state that we live in now. Mark still is in the religion and apparently takes it really seriously. I'm told he now works for the church back in Jordan's hometown. Also, as far as I know, Mark is the only person from the religious community that Jordan still talks to besides her parents, which I'm mentioning because I now think it could be a red flag. So on Saturday I met Mark for the first time because he was in our city and Jordan wanted us all to have dinner together. At this point I want to say, I will admit that when we were first dating, I found out that Jordan had a best friend who was a guy I didn't really like, especially because it seemed like they were on FaceTime with each other a lot. But since it was a childhood friend and they mostly didn't see each other in person, I just trusted Jordan that Mark was only a friend and didn't let it bother me, and eventually I got over it. So when we were going to dinner, I wasn't jealous or suspicious of Mark at all. If anything, I was somewhat excited to finally be meeting him since I've been hearing about him for 2 years. But then the way Jordan and Mark acted at dinner is what convinced me that there's something going on there other than just being best friends. I honestly don't even know how to describe it except to say that I've never seen two people act more obviously like they were in love with each other. They literally would not stop touching each other. They were constantly touching each other's arms and shoulders, and at some points they were actually even holding hands. They completely left me out of the conversation and were laughing about inside jokes, and every time they'd laugh they'd do this thing where they put their foreheads together, or that was when they'd be holding hands. And then also they were just looking at each other in a way that I didn't feel comfortable with at all. It was honestly even worse than the touching. It just wasn't how anyone would look at somebody they're supposedly just friends with. I'm 100% sure that every stranger looking at our table thought that Jordan and Mark were the couple and that I was her brother or something. I felt like a third wheel the whole time, and Jordan didn't even notice how awkward she was making it for me because she was way too focused on Mark and all the attention she was getting from him. And that's really not like Jordan at all. Usually she's a lot more considerate and would notice immediately if I wasn't having a good time or if she was accidentally being rude and excluding someone at the table. So it was genuinely really jarring to be sitting there with her and Mark and basically feeling like I didn't know my girlfriend at all. It was like he turned her into a completely different person who didn't even care that I was alive. So finally, at one point when Jordan got up to go to the bathroom, I just said to Mark, "So are you into my girl or what's going on here?" Mark: "Nothing's going on at all. That ship sailed a long time ago." Me: "What does that mean? Did you guys date at some point?" Mark: "No, we never did. And then when she left the church, we both knew it meant that we were never going to. And we've accepted being in each other's lives as friends. There's nothing else going on at all." Me: "That makes it sound like the only reason you're not together is because she left the church." And all Mark did was shrug. Me: "Well, what if she came back to the church? Would you marry her?" Mark: "Oh, she's not going to do that. You might as well ask what would happen if a bicycle had 6 tires." And so then when Jordan came back to the table, Mark said to her, "OP wants to know if we'd be married if you weren't a godless heathen." Jordan: "Why did you two call your mom while I was gone?" And then she and Mark both just laughed about it and changed the subject. So because of dinner and that conversation and everything else that I've written about in this post, I really feel like Jordan and Mark are in love with each other and not just best friends like they say. And the only reason they aren't together is because they can't compromise about their religion. I think Jordan thinks that because she's okay with that decision, she expects me to be okay with being her second choice, and in the meantime she's actually secretly wanting to be with Mark. So that makes me think that I should probably obviously just have self-respect and break up with her, because I shouldn't be in a relationship with someone who would rather be with somebody else. But then the problem for me is that our relationship has been so perfect and Jordan has always treated me so well except for this one night. The only time she's ever acted like this was on the one occasion that Mark was around in person. Normally, even when she's talking to him all the time, she's never made me feel this way. So on the one hand, I'm wondering if maybe it doesn't matter what Jordan's feelings are for Mark, as long as he isn't going to be around, it doesn't actually seem to affect our relationship. So maybe I just need to cool off and go back to trusting her that they are indeed only friends, even if it seems to be true that they have complicated feelings for each other. Or should I just end things? Relevant comments. Or Michalski: "What did Jordan say about all this when you two got home and had a private discussion?" "We didn't talk about it again. I've just been trying to weigh things out on my own for the last few days. I wasn't sure how I should try to talk to her about it or if that was the best idea." In reply: "Cap does it. I mean, the only way forward at this point is to talk to your girlfriend. You need to sit down with her and have a frank discussion about the events of the night and what made you uncomfortable. How she responds to your concerns will tell you almost everything you need to know. The main thing I would be concerned about when starting the conversation is that your girlfriend seems like she might be quick to brush off any of your concerns without hearing them out. If she does that, you need to push back. Make it clear that you need to be heard on this issue and that she needs to take you seriously here. Then really, you just need to first of all tell her that you found a lot of her actions with Jordan to be not only inappropriate but hurtful to you. Establish boundaries as well. Be explicit, the hand-holding, pressing their foreheads up against one another, etc. All goes far beyond what best friends do with each other. I think your best bet is to mostly frame the conversation around that. What you do from there really depends on how your girlfriend reacts to that. I can see it going one of two ways. This would be the ideal situation, but maybe she genuinely did not realize what she was doing in that environment. She was in a weird church cult for what seems like a decent chunk of her life. It's possible that she sees that behavior as normal and not at all concerning. That doesn't excuse the behavior, but it could go a long way to alleviate your concerns. She goes on the defensive and claims you are exaggerating what happened. You're just being jealous. That's just how their relationship is. I'd say that if she immediately responds with being defensive, then that tells you more or less all you need to know. Either way though, you need to talk to her and she needs to understand that her actions were inappropriate. It might be tempting to sweep it under the rug if she tries to laugh it off. After all, how often are you really going to be interacting with this Mark * person anyway? But if you're really considering a long-term thing with this girl, you need to think in the long term. Say you do get married to this girl. You really want to fully commit yourself to someone who you believe would drop you for someone else in a heartbeat. Thanks for this comment. This gives me a lot of good stuff to think about. A couple of people have mentioned that her behavior around Mark might have a different context than I thought because of how they grew up. Not that that means I should let it go and not tell her that it bothered me, but that maybe she didn't realize that it doesn't seem normal and maybe it's not as much as a sign of something as I thought. So I might start by just bringing up to her, I think that could be a good idea. There are comments on how inappropriate GF's behavior was. Ali_cat 222. I may get some hate for this, but I am a F whose best friend is a guy and I don't even do more than give him a quick hug before we part after hanging out. That may just be me, but I couldn't imagine holding hands and touching foreheads together, especially if my SO was there if I had one. How does growing up with someone equate to needing to hold hands, touching forearms, etc.? To me that comes off as disrespectful. Now having said that though, I do believe the best thing to do is talk to her. Ignoring it won't get you anywhere, and I will admit that the way I may view things doesn't mean that's the way she viewed it, nor necessarily was trying to be flirtatious either. The only way to work through things in a relationship is letting your partner know how you feel in situations. If you don't discuss things that you may be feeling uncomfortable with, you won't have a good continual foundation for your relationship otherwise. I wish you all the best and hope you can work things out. Rezua R. Touching foreheads and holding hands? I mean, the rest of it is over the line but maybe excusable in some way. But this? I don't know how you didn't say something when it happened. It just seems so bizarre to me for friends to do that. There has to be something more. It just doesn't make any sense otherwise, no matter how you try and view it. Maybe they think of each other as the one that got away. Maybe some kind of tragedy. Romeo and Juliet. Right person, wrong circumstances kind of thing. What I really think is that at the least, this will happen every time Mark makes an appearance in your lives. And at worst you'll always be second to him, whether he's there or not. Aliando Elise. My jaw dropped when I read that, for real. Nora Ray J. Same, I could not imagine being OP at that moment. It would make me cry if my partner did that to me. Sidri. She obviously carries a torch that will never go out. If knowing your runner-up is something you can live with, give it a shot. But 2 years isn't long and there's a lot of years left. If something changes later and an opportunity opens up, she'd go running. If something changes later and an opportunity opens up, she'd go running. That's the big thing that scares me, because I do think that I could maybe live with the fact that there was someone else before me and that she eventually did choose me over him. But then I think about what could happen if Mark decided that he was ever going to leave the church like Jordan did. Which doesn't seem like it's going to happen from the way they both talk about it, but then I know that I'm a different person now at 29 than I was when I was 26, so it's not impossible for him to change his mind. And then if that really was the only reason that Jordan was with me, of course she'd leave to go be with him like what she always wanted. First update. 2 days later. I talked to Jordan on Wednesday night. The TLDR update to the situation is that I didn't break up with her. After we talked about everything, I feel like that would be too much of an overreaction for what's actually going on. I do still think I was right to be upset about what I saw happening at dinner on Saturday, and Jordan didn't disagree with me about that. But I think I did jump to the wrong conclusion that it meant that she secretly actually wanted to be with Mark more than she wanted to be with me. Now that we've talked it out, I don't think there's a reason to end what's otherwise the best relationship I've ever had, and I'm glad that I didn't just immediately trust my instincts, because there was more going on with the situation that I didn't really understand that Jordan has since told me, and now I do feel like she can be given some grace in this situation, assuming nothing like this ever happens again. So thanks for the advice, especially for everyone who told me to just talk to her before I made a big decision. So when we talked, I decided to take the main piece of advice that I got from everyone and start by telling Jordan that my feelings were hurt by the way she treated me at dinner with Mark, and then see how the conversation went from there. It turned into a very long talk, so I don't want to try to remember exact quotes and get them wrong, but here are the important things. I repeated to Jordan some of what I wrote in the post and said that I felt excluded by her and Mark, especially because they were being overly touchy-feely with each other to the point where it made me uncomfortable. Jordan seemed surprised, like she didn't even notice that she and Mark were touching each other that much, but then she thought about it and said that I was right and apologized. She said that Mark is always really touchy with everybody and not just her, I asked, and so she didn't even think about it, but that she wished I would have said something at the time because she didn't realize they were being that obnoxious. I said that was part of what bothered me, because I thought that normally she would have noticed something like that, but she was acting so different around Mark and not paying any attention to anything else, including how I was feeling, that it was honestly just made me question which one of us she cared about more, or if she cared about him as more than just a friend. Jordan apologized more and said that she could understand why it would look that way to me, but that she loves me and cares more about me than anyone else in the world, and that she didn't mean to act like that or make me feel that way. She said that she was trying to not make Mark feel like a third wheel because of being a single guy out with a couple, but obviously it backfired and just made me feel like the third wheel instead, which wasn't what she wanted to do either. After that, Jordan explained a lot to me about her history with Mark, and basically as she explained it, she said that she fully admits she cares about him as more than just a normal friend, but she says that it's not in a romantic way. She said that's why she always specifically refers to him as her best friend, and not just as her friend, and said that she would use the phrase "he's like my brother" if it weren't for the fact that she once had an actual brother, RIP, so she won't use that phrasing for anyone else. According to Jordan, the main thing that happened to make her and Mark so close was that when she was 17 she tried to kill herself. And that was actually when everyone else in the community stopped talking to her and Mark was the only person who didn't. For the next couple of years until she moved, he was literally her only friend, and she said that he checked on her every single day to make sure she stayed alive, which is also when they got into the habit of talking on the phone so much. And also apparently during this time Mark's parents thought they were dating and made a big deal about how they shouldn't be, and that's why she made that remark during dinner. Apparently calling Jordan a godless heathen is something that Mark's mom said. I did tell Jordan that Mark basically said to me that he thought the two of them would be married if she had stayed in the church, and I asked her if she thinks that maybe Mark is in love with her even if she doesn't feel the same way. She said definitely not, and I don't think she was being dishonest. I really don't agree with her, but I think she genuinely believes that Mark isn't into her in any way apart from friendship. Her opinion of the situation is that she also thinks she and Mark would eventually have gotten married if she had never left the church or moved. But from her perspective it would have been more because of peer pressure than anything else, and she doesn't think it would necessarily have been a good thing. She thinks Mark was just being honest about that, and that possibly from his perspective he thinks he and Jordan would have made a good couple, but he's probably thinking that because he's just assuming that in that scenario she'd be the perfect church wife, so there's no reason why they wouldn't be a good couple. But then the big thing that happened at the end of the conversation is that Jordan told me that Mark is coming back through our city on his way home from this trip. And so she was going to invite him to hang out with the two of us again, but she said that if I'm going to be uncomfortable with him around then she won't ask him. A lot of people were saying that if she didn't offer to cut contact with him or to cut down on contact with him, it meant that she valued him over me, so the fact that she brought up on her own that she wouldn't invite him to dinner with us again because I didn't like it seemed like a really good sign to me. Based on everything else that she said, I do understand why she didn't offer to totally stop being friends with him, and I wouldn't expect her to after what she told me about what happened when she was a teenager. So now I'm deciding to take Jordan's word for it that although she and Mark are weirdly close, it's for the reasons that she explained to me and not because she's in love with him. I think the fact that she was immediately apologetic instead of defensive was good, and the way she explained everything did make sense to me. I don't necessarily trust Mark, but I do think I can trust Jordan. But I am going to watch and see if it seems like she's still talking to him as much as she used to, or if anything changes or sounds different. I'm not going to be controlling and tell her that she can't talk to him or that she has to talk to him less, but I want to see if me talking to her about all of this causes her to act any differently at all. I'm kind of thinking she might realize on her own that the way Mark acts towards her actually does seem like he likes her more than a friend now that I've brought it up, but I don't know. It could be that things just go back to exactly the way they were before, and I won't know if anything has actually changed until the next time Mark is around in person, but I don't think that's something I should keep worrying about before it happens. Relevant comment signal _BlackBerry 326. Holding hands with your opposite sex friend and pushing your foreheads together in front of your monogamous partner is wild, but you do you, homie. Tamerlane _Tully. Well, Reddit, congratulations, we definitely accomplished nothing here. There's some sober pushback in the comments. OOP mostly stands his ground. Pixel _Spartan 117. OP, did she acknowledge that the touching by her was inappropriate? I do not see how she could not have recognized how touchy they were and her lack of physical touch with you. Like many others have said, I am not sure Jordan was being completely honest with you. Did you ask her how she would have felt in a reverse situation? If the three of you meet again, you might want to think about excusing yourself to go to the bathroom or something during the meal and instead hide and film their interaction while you are gone. See if Jordan changes how she interacts when you are not there. I say to capture it on your phone because then you have it to show her if you break up. If she interacts appropriately while you are gone, then she may have gotten the message. She should also start limiting her interactions with him, phone text, because that relationship is not healthy and no SO should have to deal with that if you two get married. It needs to be dealt with now. She did acknowledge that all the touching was inappropriate, yes. When she actually thought back on how much they were doing it and how over the top it was, she was embarrassed and realized she shouldn't have started acting like that just because Mark makes it seem normal. I didn't ask her how she'd feel in the reverse situation because it seemed like she got it immediately as soon as I told her how it made me feel. Unleashed 99. I am glad you spoke up and I am glad you received some clarity on the situation. Unfortunately, I think your girlfriend is lying. The problem is that she is not really lying to you. I mean, she is, but really she's lying to herself. If she is talking to this guy every day and not even realizing how physical she got with him when they met up after being physically separated for so long. She has been lying to herself for so long that the lies to you were just shrapnel from the nuclear lies she keeps telling herself. Obviously, they aren't a compatible couple long term with their core beliefs being so different, but they have fed their emotional bond for so long that their connection is intense. Dude, she didn't even realize she was physically wrapped into this man with her long-term boyfriend right next to her. That speaks volumes. I have been coaching individuals in the infidelity realm long enough to have seen this same story play out 1,000 times now. I pray I am wrong for your sake, OP. But I fear if she doesn't entirely cut off Mark, you'll be either here or in R surviving infidelity in the next 2 years with a shocked Pikachu face on saying, just found out my fiancé has been cheating with her best friend Mark. I say that and I know it comes out a little snarky, but in all honesty my heart breaks saying it. Having been through betrayal like that personally, I'd gladly sacrifice many things in my own life to help prevent others from experiencing that same pain. So even if you believe your girlfriend, hold on to a shred of doubt and wonder if the experts might have some wisdom to offer your situation. As I saw someone else mention, the book Not Just Friends by Shirley Glass would be amazingly on point for your situation and might lead you towards some growth here. No matter what you choose, I pray you find peace and joy. Good luck. If the three of us are ever together again, I'll definitely be watching everything, but I don't think there's a chance of that happening for a while. I can admit there's a possibility that Jordan is just wrong about how she feels. After our talk, I do honestly think that's more likely than that she's trying to be dishonest or is gaslighting me. If that turns out to be the case, then that's going to have to be the end of the relationship, but I'm deciding to at least give her a chance here. Specific bag, 7401. A lot of what you detail still sounds weird. Especially the part where she didn't want to make Mark feel left out because he was visiting with a couple, him being a single man. Mark in no way visited with a couple. If Jordan is so empathetic re this issue, she sure missed showing any empathy for you. I don't think you will experience much difference with the next encounter with all three of you. You're very enthusiastic to give Jordan a pass. This will continue to haunt you. You don't seem to think you deserve to have this made right. Jordan has a very wide berth. I wish you the best. You just seem to feel you deserve so little. It's so sad. I do agree with you that it still sounds weird, but with more context I'm just more comfortable with it. Don't get me wrong, I still didn't appreciate being treated like a third wheel at dinner, and I still thought that Mark and Jordan were too handsy with each other just in general, and I'm not okay with that continuing. But if she's being honest with me that it's not because of romantic feelings, which I think she is, then I think as long as she's willing to have boundaries from now on after understanding that it made me uncomfortable, I don't think it's as much of a red flag as I thought before. In a lengthy comment, OOP is asked to consider whether it's not a matter of Jordan believable but that he wants to believe her so strongly that he is subconsciously subverting his standards for judgment. That's a really well thought out comment, and I appreciate you taking the time to write it. And I absolutely do understand why everyone thinks I'm just letting Jordan gaslight me. Honestly, I'd probably think the same thing if someone else was telling me this story, so I can't really blame everyone. But I truly don't think I'm just being steered by wanting to believe her. It's hard to convey everything that happened when we talked into one post, but I'm just very sure that she was being genuine, and it was that convinced me that I could believe that she was saying. It wasn't that I just stopped being objective because that was the easier thing to do. Honestly, I think it would have been easier to keep assuming that what I thought in the first place was true, because honestly it's easier for me to understand. I do think that Jordan's attachment to Mark is weird and probably unhealthy, and even if she doesn't think so, I think there's more than just friendship going on from his side of things. But I think Jordan is being honest that she's not in love with him and that she wants to be with me and not him, and that was the thing that was making me question the relationship. The other stuff that I do still take issue with I think can be worked out as long as Jordan takes seriously that she can't be acting in a way with Mark that disrespects me and our relationship, even if in her head it's not in a romantic way, and from the way our talk went I think I can trust her to do so. Second update, 2.5 months later. I apologize if this isn't right. I've never tried to post to my profile on here before, but a lot of people wanted an update and I don't think I'm allowed to post to the original subreddit. The situation seems pretty resolved now, after Mike and Jordan had an argument over everything and are no longer friends. What happened was that after Jordan told Mark we weren't available to hang out when he came back through our city, he blamed me, saying that he could tell Jordan was only saying no to hanging out because I had a problem with him. Jordan admitted that this was part of the reason and told Mark that she wanted a bit of space from him because she was trying to be respectful of our relationship. Mark got really offended and kept asking Jordan to explain why him being around was disrespectful to our relationship, and kept pretending not to understand her answers. And then eventually during the conversation he started trying to guilt Jordan into making time for him and told her that she's become a worse person over the years, because the Jordan he knew would never blow him off. That upset Jordan a lot because she took it as Mark saying that she was a bad person since she left the church, and she started crying and she ended up hanging up on him. Jordan and I talked a lot afterwards. I told her that I thought Mark was toxic because anyone else would have been understanding of what she said. Jordan said that a lot of what he said during the conversation reminded her of being in the church. She said that she couldn't explain it except that it was his attitude when he tried to argue with her, but that it made her not really want to talk to him even outside of anything to do with our relationship. Mark texted Jordan the day after asking if she really wasn't going to come see him and if she was going to pick some boyfriend over her only friend after he's been there for her through everything. Jordan texted Mark back explaining her point again and saying that their friendship couldn't be the same anymore as it used to be now that she was with someone, and that he should understand that. Mark texted Jordan that he couldn't believe she'd treat her best friend like that. Jordan tried to text Mark saying that a friend wouldn't be guilty of tripping her, but it turned out that he had blocked her number. After that, Jordan was feeling like she'd done something wrong and was too mean to Mark, but she and I talked about it again and she realized that she was right to not want to be friends with Mark if he's going to treat her like she owes him loyalty. Jordan then blocked him back, including on all her socials, so that if later he changes his mind and tries to apologize she can ignore him. A couple of weeks went by, and while I'll admit I was pretty happy about not hearing from Mark, Jordan was really bummed about how everything ended. She said that although she saw now that Mark isn't a good person to have in her life because of his reaction to her trying to set a boundary, she still felt sad and abandoned, and it was bringing back a lot of the same feelings as when she was a teenager and her other church friends all turned their backs on her. So at this point I asked her if she's ever thought about going to therapy for religious trauma, and she said she'd gone for a few months when she first left the church, but the therapist wasn't really helpful. I suggested that maybe it would be a good idea to try again with a better therapist because it sounds like all this stuff still bothers her a lot, and Jordan agreed with me and decided to make an appointment. She's had a couple of therapy sessions that she says so far are good, but I don't really ask her for any details on what they talk about, so I can't really update on that part of the situation. Relevant comments. Asiktak. Mark sounds toxic at this point. He sounded iffy before, honestly, with the way he was so positive he would have been with Jordan, but this is not the way you treat someone who is supposed to be a friend. He wants to be her #1 friend, then he should try actually being a friend and listening. I assume he isn't, because in his religion the man is supposed to speak and the woman is supposed to listen. Yes, tell Jordan to try a different therapist. If the therapist isn't working for her, that just means she has the wrong therapist. She can find a good one, and I really hope she does. Agreed. I didn't trust Mark when I thought he was just in love with her, but seeing him be so shitty and demanding really made it clear that he's a POS. Julia Valentine. I've been reading these posts since it first came out, and it sucks that it had to turn out this way, but I think it's for the better. Especially the part of her going back to therapy too. Does she have other new friends not related to the church that she can rely on too? Her having her own support system that is separate from you and Mark could also help her. Anyways, wishing you all the best. Jordan seems like a very lovely girl, and I'm glad you both are going strong outside of the trauma. Does she have other new friends not related to the church that she can rely on too? She does. We have a few couples that we're pretty close friends with, and she also has a bunch of friends from her work who I know she talks to about problems and all that stuff. $10K and boyfriend wanted a car, but after a big fight, I spent it all. Now he's angrier than ever, and I don't know how to confess. Original post. He's a full-time student who works part-time in the summer. I have a full-time and part-time job. He studies a lot. We live together and mostly live off my pay while he stretches what he makes in the summer. Neither of us have ever owned a car because it isn't necessary where we live. We both walk or take the public everywhere to save money. In the morning we stop at a corner shop shortly before splitting up for the day. He buys cigarettes and coffee. I buy fruit for my lunch and, on the weekends, lotto tickets. He always makes fun of me for paying the stupid tax. But I figure my indulgence is cheaper and doesn't come with lung cancer. Sometimes I jokingly tell him not to expect a penny when I win. The day I won he answered me with "Fine, keep it all. It's not like I'm crying over a penny of nothing over here." I showed him I'd won. He stared for a bit and then dismissively told me I'd probably spent more than that on tickets. In response I asked what I should blow his half on for myself. I was honestly joking at the time, but he suddenly became angrier than I've ever seen him, and I didn't want to admit I'd been kidding because he was so pissed off it pissed me off. He wants a car, and I don't. He keeps trying to steamroller me, so I'm refusing to share the money. In honesty, I'm willing to spend or save the money for us, but I don't want a car. I won't use a car, and it will keep costing us money in parking and maintenance. After weeks of him sulking and lecturing me about his entitlement to the money, he took me to a car lot and tried to embarrass me into going along with him in front of a salesman. I threw a tantrum after we left without buying anything, and I went to my mom's and paid our rent up to the end of the year and donated the rest to charity. He doesn't know. I fucked up and don't know how to come clean. Teal doctor, I haven't told my boyfriend I spent the money I won because I was upset he was being a dick. He's already angry at me. What should I do? Top comments. Comment 1. I fucked up and don't know how to come clean. I don't think you fucked up at all. Comment 2. Me neither. You spent your money buying the tickets, it's technically your winning money. It's not like you're married, that'd be a little different. He's just mad that he didn't support your buying the tickets in the first place, so now he looks entitled. I think you spent the money very wisely. Plus now he doesn't have to worry about rent. He better not complain. Comment 3. Agree. The only way this would be a fuck up is if OP has a tax bill coming due to the winning with no funds, anymore, to pay it. OP. No. I rounded down to $10,000 because I was counting after tax and a celebratory dinner. Comment 4. All in all, OP, you sound like a very level-headed person. Your boyfriend, on the other hand, sounds like a huge jerk. Why are you with someone who treats you like that? Comment 5. You paid up rent for both of you, or just yourself? OP. It's my place from before dating him. I never ask him for rent because it cost me the same either way. Comment 6. Just to be clear, he's living rent-free and you share finances, meaning you pay for everything unless his part-time job gives him enough hours. And he's demanding more money from you? Comment 7. I think you should seriously consider everyone's responses. Your boyfriend does not sound like he's respectful or appreciative of the effort you put into your relationship. That said, do you mean that your dad gave you money when you turned 18 so you could get yourself out of an abusive situation if you had to? Because that's the first I've heard of a parent doing that, but it's seriously an awesome idea. I know a few women who keep saving specifically because they want to have insurance in case of a bad situation, but never a parent initiates that sort of savings. If I ever have children, I'm totally stealing that idea. OOP, yeah, my dad sat me down and gave me the grown-up talk about verbal and physical abuse and consent. How to recognize it, what to do, how not to be abusive. Then he gave me the money and explained how to use it. He did this for all his kids, boy or girl. Update. Long story short, a couple months before I won, my boyfriend had secretly dropped out of school to join a Christian rock band. He's not Christian, and began to cover his new coke habit, which explains so much. He took me winning as a sign they were about to make it and should go on tour. That's why he wanted the car so damn much. Obviously we had a huge fight. I sacrificed a lot because he told me he'd never be happy without that degree, and he threw it away to play rockstar while I ground myself down at dead-end jobs. I told him I agreed to support him through one dream, and if he was done with it I was going after my dreams now. He made all kinds of promises to me about how he'll take care of me when he gets famous, but I told him the only promises I cared about were the ones he made when I agreed to help him through school. He broke up with me until I came to your senses. As far as I'm concerned, that's already happened. So I had his brother pick up his stuff. He tried to cause problems with me illegally evicting him, but I reminded him I had some text conversations where he said, "Your apartment is your problem, and I don't live there anymore, so deal with it." I have no idea if that's legally enforceable, but neither does he. My lease is up in 3 months and I won't have to worry about it after that. It's been really rough accepting he's not the guy I fell in love with anymore, but the way he's been acting has made it a lot easier. I'm mostly angry I sunk so much of my time and money and compromised my future for him. But I guess it's better I found out now instead of later. I got tested in case he cheated or was doing other drugs, and so far so good. I'm also 9,000% sure my ex staged the 3 break-ins we had in our apartment after one of his friends told me around that time my then BF was trying to sell my prescriptions and his laptop, that I ended up replacing FFS, that were supposedly stolen. I told the cops and his friend agreed to make a statement, but IDK what's happening with that yet. Other than that, I'm happy to report I'm only working one job now that's actually something I want to do and pays way more. My apartment is much nicer without his junk, and now the toilet is never unflushed and the seat is always down, so I've got that going for me too. With all my free time I've rescued a kitty and I'm learning to knit. I was planning on becoming an old cat lady, but I also went on my second first date ever. It was with another woman, which was kind of a surprise but also somehow not. We've got a second date planned and I'm incredibly giddy with anticipation, which is really nice. Oh, and I told my dad how much you liked his dump him fun consent conversation, and he said his grandma gave him one when he decided to get married at 18, not my mom, so he can't take credit for the idea. Edit. Thanks for all the well wishes everyone. TL.dr, boyfriend dumped me, can't complain. Top comments. Comment 1. Sorry he turned out to be such a heel. Getting dumped is never fun, but a bullet was definitely dodged here. My apartment is much nicer without his junk, and now the toilet is never unflushed and the seat is always down, so I've got that going for me. Which is nice. Comment 2. Being dumped is never fun, but I think in OP's case, it's the best thing that could have happened to her, lol. And can't forget, with all my free time I've rescued a kitty, yay to rescue animals. Comment 3. Entitled a coke addict, a thief, etc. etc. What a complete pile of human garbage. Congratulations on getting rid of him. Enjoy doing you, OP. Comment 4. LOL, and wanted to be in a Christian rock band. Hilarious when you consider all of those factors together. Comment 5. The toilet is never unflushed. The fuck? Did he not flush? OOP, not usually, which made it so much more lovelier that time I forgot to check the seat and fell in. Comment 6. Yay kitty cat. Also, while this all really sucked for you to live through, I am sure that it will be the most delightful of anecdotes. Dropped out of school to join a Christian rock band is just about the dumbest life plan I can think of, especially given the general state of the music industry as a whole and of Christian rock in particular. OOP. It's very unlike him. I thought he was messing with me until he showed me the videos. Not good. IDK, if coke explains all of what's going on, there may be other drugs I don't know about. He's not the same as when we met, I know that much. I posted an update to RR's relationships after asking for advice, and someone recommended I make sure I can't get in legal trouble over the situation. I live in CA and have had my apartment for 4 years. My ex lived with me for 3 years. He never paid rent or was on the lease. My landlord knew he was there and he got mail there. My lease is up in 3 months and I'm planning on moving. He left willingly, and when I texted him about some damage he'd done to the building that he'd promised our landlord he'd fix, he sent me 2 texts that I kept copies of saying, "Your apartment is your problem and I don't live there anymore, so deal with it." He sent his brother to my place to pick up some music equipment and I had his brother take all his stuff with him. My ex texted me angrily about how I couldn't just illegally evict him but backed off when I sent him screenshots of the texts. Also, the police are currently investigating him for 3 break-ins to my apartment when he lived there based on one of his friends making a statement that he tried to sell him my prescriptions and his laptop around that time. I don't know if that's relevant. Could he cause me any legal problems?